Hello and welcome to Purely Academic, your potentially educational podcast. This is the monthly stuff for March 2026. I'm Dr. Jonathan Lack. I write about movies. I teach cinema studies at the University of Colorado. And this episode is going to be so depressing, I took a double dose of all my meds this morning.
And I'm Sean Chapman, high school English teacher by day, otaku by night, and I'm very happy that they've released a great Resident Evil game because that has really helped me take my mind off shit.
Indeed. So we will not be talking much about Resident Evil Requiem today because I'm not finished with it yet. Are you finished, Sean?
No, although
Okay.
I did spend all Saturday playing it, which I think the last time I did that with the game was when Elden Ring came out, and I was just like, I'm just going to spend the entire Saturday just doing this, and it's really good.
It's phenomenal. We will do we are going to devote a whole episode. Our next episode of Purely Academic is going to be all about Resident Evil Requiem, and that should be coming soon. So if you're wanting to hear us talk about that, we decided specifically to have, look, there's been a lot of news lately, and it's all depressing, and it's all bad, and we're going to have that talk today on a news-focused Purely Academic, and then next week we can talk about a fantastic game in one of our favorite series, and just not worry about all that other shit, and it'll be good.
Yes, we're recording this episode much earlier than we normally would between news-focused Purely Academics because, 5 episodes worth of news shit happened in the span of, 2 weeks, and it kept on happening. That's the crazy shit, is that enough happened that we were like, oh, we should just go ahead and do another news one right away. And then it just more big crazy shit. And then just talking about it in the world of entertainment, not the other big crazy shit that's obviously ripping the world apart. But it's just been fucking nonstop, and it's the end of February. This is not supposed to be when we've got all the crazy shit going down.
No, so look, we got a lot of news to talk about today. That'll be the bulk of it. I think we'll do a little bit of stuff at the end, and we've got a monthly 10. Did you get our fun monthly 10 ready for today, Sean?
Yes.
Okay.
I did have a panicked moment a couple of days ago where I was like, oh, wait, shit, right, we're doing the Purely Academic already. I gotta get that. And I had already come up with most of my list, but I had to make sure I had it good. And I'm very happy with this very dumb fucking list I've made.
And I think it should be a good way to bring us back up at the end of this very depressing episode. So you've got all that to look forward to. Housekeeping note, remember, Japanimation Station Season 6 Part 1 is premiering March 15th, so just in about 2 weeks from when we're recording this, maybe about a week from when you're hearing this, and we are very excited for you guys to be hearing that. I've been doing a bunch of editing and post-production on that. It's very fun. Sean, I'm producing these episodes in 4K for the first time for YouTube, which doesn't make a huge difference with our show because it's mostly a static image, but that static image does look a lot better. It means the bitrate is higher, so the audio comes through better, and the theme song and all the other video parts of it look better. And it's been kind of fun for me to learn some of the quirks of that editing style, because I've never produced above 1080p for anything we've done because I haven't felt the need to. But I thought, you know what, we've been working on this so long, and we had enough of a pre-production window that I was like, I have time to experiment with this, right?
Yes, well, I'm that's fantastic news. I'm, however, more excited for when we eventually produce an 8K podcast. I think that's where of course, that's where we all need to go. And I think we need to be the first 8K podcast in the world. I could technically do it. My Mac Final Cut can technically do it. I don't have any 8K material to put in. That's the thing. I don't know how to create an image in 8K. I guess in Photoshop you could tell it to do that. I also have no equipment. I can plug my computer into my TV and see the native 4K, and that's how I know, okay, this does actually make a difference. It does look better. I can see a native 4K pixel map. And no one else does either, to my knowledge, have an 8K display. So. Okay, well, if we can't do it in 8K, can we do it in 3D? Can we have a 3D JPEG? So if anyone still owns a 3D TV from 2009, that they can watch it that way on YouTube. Which
that I think would be
can do that in any way.
That would be easier because I could just take the static image that's our key art for the episode and do the slight offset with the different colors, and then do it with I'm thinking red blue 3D glasses here. Yes. I don't know how you do it with an actual 3D television. That's beyond my kin. But maybe I could do it Spy Kids 3D style.
There you go. And we could just have the logo jump out at the camera for everyone who watches a still image while they listen to 4 hours of us ramble about fucking anime.
Is this us trying to put off talking about the news today,
Yes.
Sean? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Should we go ahead and get started?
Yeah, what's going on in the news, Jonathan?
Well, last week, this is actually the most recent episode of Purely Academic has a very rare I cut in right before releasing the episode because you had a whole thing where we were talking about the God of War trilogy remake
Yes.
that was announced, and you were talking about, like, maybe this is Bluepoint, that would be so cool. And we're like, yeah, Bluepoint rocks. We love Bluepoint. They're going to be around forever. And then, like, literally, Sean, like, days after you said that, we get the news that we're about to talk about. So I did do a brief cut-in to talk about that last week because I just didn't want to... It felt like cursed to put that episode out with you cheerily talking about Bluepoint without us, like, acknowledging that. So that's in that last episode, but let's go through it in depth here, Sean. On February 19th, Jason Schreier at Bloomberg broke the news that Sony is shuttering Bluepoint games. Bluepoint is known for their remasters, such as porting God of War 1 and 2 to PS3, or the Uncharted Nathan Drake collection to PS4, and of course for their remakes, like Shadow of the Colossus on PS4, and the Demon's Souls remake on PS5. It was a PS5 launch title, and that was their, not just latest release, but they will be their last release. After the release of that game, Bluepoint was acquired as part of Sony's acquisition spree in 2021, and now, without ever shipping a title under Sony, 70 employees have been laid off following, quote, a recent business review. On February 27th, Jason Schreier published a follow-up report at Bloomberg with details. Let's go through these really quick. After that 2021 acquisition, Bluepoint spent their first year with Sony as a support studio on God of War Ragnarok, which released in 2022. That's, makes sense. New talent, getting up to speed. There's a game that's about to come out, needs some help. Okay, that's fine. Afterwards, Bluepoint wanted to make their own original game. They did want to move beyond remasters and remakes. And so they were assigned a live service God of War game where and Jason Schreier revealed kind of our first details of what this might have been. Apparently the game's scenario was that Atreus would fall into Hades and have to fight his way out, potentially with some kind of co-op element. But Bluepoint is a relatively small team, again 70 people, and their expertise is mainly in art and engineering, not in game design. Staffers were not generally happy with the project, and it didn't make a ton of progress. In January of 2025, that title was canceled amidst all of the, kind of reverse coursing on the various live service initiatives at Sony. In early 2025, after that cancellation, Bluepoint pitched a remake of From Software's Bloodborne, the PS4 exclusive, but From Software vetoed that idea. The kind of chatter within the industry is that there's a couple of things. One, FromSoft might not have loved the Demon's Souls remake for some of its changes to art design and whatnot, but also Hidetaka Miyazaki would like to do something with Bloodborne himself. He has just been too busy to do it, and they want to keep that in-house, which is their right. Bluepoint also pitched an updated version of their Shadow of the Colossus remake, maybe some kind of PS5 remaster, which Sony also turned down. Alongside, they tried to pitch other projects in existing franchises, including Ghost of Tsushima, but nothing was greenlit. A year or so passed with no new project secured. According to Schreier, quote, behind the scenes, Sony no longer thought Bluepoint was equipped to make its own game and couldn't find a partnership that made sense, according to people familiar with the company's thinking. So I have some more context and news I want to talk about here, including just how many studios Sony has been buying and then closing. But let's pause here, Sean, and react. I mean, in the little cut-in I did for last week's episode, you could hear I was pretty mad. I'm still pretty mad. This is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen in the gaming space. What do you think? Do you have a difference of opinion here?
No, I mean, yeah, it's obviously, it's one of, a long line of fuck-ups in Sony, and more broadly in the Western video game industry we've seen in the kind of post-COVID period of this rush for these acquisitions, a fumbling. Obviously, there's this sort of large-scale movement towards trying to build these live service games as a service games, which is understandable on one hand because it is it is true that it is a thing that this industry needs to kind of contend with at some point, that the most played games and the most profitable games in the world have been the same games for 5, 6, for some of them, like Minecraft and Grand Theft Auto 5, 10 years now. So it's there's an understandable sort of desire for, I got to get that bag, right? I need that kind of money because look at the kind of money that these people are sitting on. But also, obviously the sort of the blind capitalist push for those things is at the expense of, I mean, everything, because nobody can do this. Everybody who did it lucked into it. Epic didn't wake up one day and have a master plan to have Fortnite be the biggest game of the world. Epic stumbled into that blindly with a game that was going to be a Minecraft ripoff that then they suddenly made into a PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds ripoff, and that just happened to catch fire, right? They didn't be like, and eventually we'll have Simpsons tie-ins and all this kind of shit, right? And so I think we have just seen this industry sort of flail madly in this post-COVID period, and there has just been a ridiculous number of projects and a ridiculous number of studios that have been sent to the grave as a result of this, and Bluepoint is the most recent one. And Bluepoint is one of the more shocking ones, I think partially because we just hadn't heard or seen anything from them in such a long time. And so I think there was like for what I talked about on the last podcast, where I speculated that they were potentially doing that God of War trilogy remake, was just because we haven't seen anything from them. We hadn't heard anything from them. And so for that announcement to just be, oh no, and now they're just gone 5 years later with a project that we kind of, if you follow industry scuttle, you kind of knew about this vague God of War multiplayer thing in the background, but was not anything that's ever made sense. It just was a really, really shocking, anger-inducing and disappointing announcement.
Yeah, I mean, I want to echo something I heard the guys on the Digital Foundry podcast say, which is that if you're Sony and you can't find something for this team to do, why even be in video games? Why even try this? It's ridiculous that you would have a team with that talent, that legacy. They've got proprietary tools and engine stuff and just amazing technical talent. It's a small team. It's 70 people. If you can't find something for them to do, you're insane. That statement that Sony gave to Jason Schreier, where it says, behind the scenes, Sony no longer thought Bluepoint was equipped to make its own game and couldn't find a partnership that made sense. That first half, Bluepoint was not equipped to make its own game. Maybe that's true. But couldn't find a partnership that made sense. Why is that their problem? Why is that all on the shoulders of your subsidiary? You could find them a partner. That's insane, right? That's nuts. That there's not the idea that there really is nothing that you could do. That you have a studio that is known for one, Sony. No one on earth loves fucking remastering and re-releasing games more than fucking Sony. Especially if it's all, even if it's already on the console playable, they'll fucking do it. Who cares? The fact that there's nothing that could happen there. They couldn't help with your PC porting initiative. They couldn't do any, that's what really boggles my mind. And it's this short-term thinking, the idea that you think you're an ongoing part of this industry and you just don't need a team that you own with that kind of talent. That level of short-sightedness really baffles me.
Yeah, I think it exposes a lot about I think where Sony's at. I mean, obviously, I think that this is an opening salvo of. I suspect that this is attached to everything that's going on with the increasing costs of memory and storage and all this kind of stuff. That I imagine that this is the beginning of Sony tightening its belt in specific ways, and that Bluepoint was in an incredibly vulnerable position because they did not have an active project, which made them an easy target to be laid off because they didn't have to cancel a game and shutter a studio at the same time. And so I think there was a certain amount of really bad luck that Bluepoint had that those things aligned in the way that we saw with Microsoft in the past couple of years, where the studio that did Tango, that did Hi-Fi Rush, right? And that they didn't have an active project, even though their last project was, the most acclaimed thing Microsoft had for years at that point. They were just fucking dead. Because it was the easiest target for them to shut down. And I think that's one thing we see here. I think another thing we see is that Sony's sort of when we're talking about the remakes and the remasters, where that has moved so much has to this position where studios do their own remakes and remasters. So that's The Last of Us Part 1 remake/remaster. The Horizon Zero Dawn one is a partnership with Guerrilla and Nixies, but Guerrilla still worked on it. And I think that there's a clear sort of one of the functions those serve is as these kind of stopgap projects for certain members of the staff because of the huge development time that so many of these AAA games have, that they're taking 7-8 years to make. You've got all these people you need to do something. You've got new hires that have come on that need to learn the process and all that kind of stuff. And so a lot of those remakes have all moved to those internal studios rather than contracting someone outside to do the bulk of the work. And this was the same drama that happened around like a lot of the post Days Gone stuff. And then there was, I forget what the name of that team was, but there was the team that was going to do The Last of Us Part 1 remake, and then Naughty Dog said, actually, if we're going to do that, we want to do that. And I think we see that kind of shifting strategy and mindset here at play as well, because part of that Jason Schreier report was that they had pitched these different things involved with Ghost of Tsushima and some of these other franchises, but basically the studios in charge of those franchises didn't want somebody else working on that. And so I do think that there is just this sense of people are so vulnerable in this industry right now that they do not want to give any of that away, that they want to keep all of that in-house to make themselves be very necessary. Because if you don't have a project, if you're not busy, if you don't have all these things going on, you are in the position that Bluepoint is in, which is your head is on the fucking plaque, basically, to be struck off. And so Bluepoint was the one in the wrong place in the wrong time. And it fucking sucks.
You know, here's a comparison that a lot of people have been making in recent weeks, is just to, like, how different Sony and Microsoft's approach has been to, like, Nintendo's historical approach when they have downturns or studios that have trouble. And specifically what I was thinking of, Sean, is Retro Studios, which is also an Austin, Texas-based studio. Bluepoint is in Austin. Retro is in Austin. Owned by a big Japanese developer/publisher. Retro Studios owned by Nintendo. And, you know, Retro, very storied. They also had a period that was a real downturn. They released Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze in 2014 for the Wii U, and they did not ship another original title until Metroid Prime 4 last year in 2025 for the Switch 2. Now, in that middle, was that long delay because Retro was a bunch of idiots with their thumbs up their asses? No, it's because they were doing things Nintendo asked them to do that, like, didn't turn out right, you know? Like, as far as we know, they were working on a Star Fox game that didn't, like, wind up working. We know they had pitched some Zelda stuff. They know they had pitched they were working on an original RPG that then got canceled when they needed to step in for Metroid Prime 4. But I guess my point is, like, Nintendo kept those guys around. I'm sure there's a lot of costs eaten during that time. Like, apparently, you know, reports are Metroid Prime 4 wound up being a very expensive game because of its relaunch development and all of that stuff. But there's no intimation so far that that means Nintendo is going to shut this studio down, or that, like, if there seems to be no future with another Metroid Prime, that they would then say, oh, well, Retro, we don't need you guys anymore. Because they've already done stuff like giving them the Donkey Kong license, right? And doing stuff with that, and, like, playing around. And that's, like, clearly very valuable. Having a studio as talented as Retro on your staff, even if you have to eat a couple of years of salaries because of, again, to be clear, mistakes you as a company made up here, not anything that your developers did on the ground, that is, like, clearly beneficial to you long term. And Nintendo can, like, play that long game. Over here in Sony land, you know, again, the thing that, like, just boils my blood is the, like, why do they not have a finished game? Maybe there were some internal problems with, like, figuring out how to make an original game, an original live service game, all of that stuff. Those are fixable problems. A doomed live service push that you didn't ask for, that your bosses are pushing on you, that's something you can't fix. And the idea that the people who ordered all of these live service initiatives still have their cushy C-suite jobs, while 70 employees who did nothing wrong don't, is absolutely enraging.
Yeah, and I do think it's important to kind of, like, contextualize this of how these things work, because it isn't like that Sony comes down from on high and, like, and tells them, here is a God of War live service game, thou must make this, right? It is this, like, soft pressure that these companies push, where, you know, Bluepoint, as far as we know from reporting and insider leaks, like, they are, you know, capable of making whatever pitches they want to make. And there was that internal push that they wanted to make their own original projects, meaning, like, something that is not a remaster or remake, not necessarily, like, original IP. But like when you know that your parent company is very interested in live service games and you know that that is like the easiest pitch to get through, there is this soft pressure that exists where that's like those are the pitches you're going to make, right? And I do see like people, I think, misunderstand the way that this dynamic works in thinking that it is like Sony decides what projects people do by giving them a sheet of paper that says God of War multiplayer Atreus game. It is more that like you know what the expectations of your parent company are, you know what their sort of desires are in the market, and so you are going to push for these live service games. And you know maybe there is another world in which Bluepoint could have come up with a very compelling pitch for a non-live service game that would have gotten greenlit, but we do not know. And yeah, it is just the sense of like that desire from so many of these companies of trying to get that kind of eternal, we're gonna, you know, make money forever off of this one project has just killed so many studios. And unfortunately, it seems that Sony is turning around on that, but obviously like that damage has so thoroughly been done for so many of these companies, that you know, it's they should have never started on that path in the first place, and it took them way too long to kind of turn around and see the signs that this shit was not panning out. You know, like they should have known that Concord, or they should have had a very strong suspicion that Concord was going to be the thing that it was well before it actually ended up coming out, and they had to cancel it like a week later, you know, and then shut the studio down. It is just a total misread of the audience in the market that Sony does have access to, and where they are very successful, and instead are trying to chase this just kind of impossible goal, and are sinking so many people in the pursuit of it.
Well, speaking of which, let's give some more context here, Sean. Stephen Totillo compiled on Blue Sky a list of Sony's post-COVID acquisition spree and like what has happened with all of those. And it's very illuminating. So in 2021, Nix's is one of the ones they got. Nix's is still there, mainly as support staff, either doing their PC ports or as support staff on other stuff. Although we also know that Sony's PC port initiative is slowing down. So I would be worried if you work at Nix's. 2021, Firesprite, big layoffs then in 2024. 2021, also Bluepoint, now closed in 2026. 2022 was Valkyrie Entertainment and Haven Studios, no layoffs or closures there. 2022 was also Bungie, big layoffs in 2024. They do have Marathon coming soon, although Marathon is another kind of, not live service quite, you do have to pay to buy it, but it is a multiplayer like online shooter, and we'll see how that goes. If that goes poorly, you know, worry for Bungie. 2022, they bought Neon Koi, closed it in 2024. 2023, they bought Firewalk, closed it in 2024. And that does not count the closure of Japan Studio, the team behind Gravity Rush and many other games, that was closed in 2021, with some of their like staff and assets folded into Team Asobi. And I think, I don't know, do you want to pause there and just comment on that before I go into my next thing, Sean? Or
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just this that post-COVID acquisition spree that both you know, Sony and then obviously Microsoft were on of using like what was relatively cheap money at the time, and coming out of that period with COVID where, you know, it's such just insane mindset of like the lack of like basic financial planning that all these companies have, where they have this huge boost in demand from COVID, and you know, there's all this money, and they're like, okay, well, now that we've got all this money, we need to buy studios, we need to hire a bunch of people, we need to do all this shit, when it's like, that is an insane way to use that money, because it's not good. That number is not going to keep going up the way it has, because there's a freak external pressure that has created the scenario in which you have this. And so everyone who hired up and bought all this shit with money that they didn't reliably have, like, it's just like such a hilariously short-sighted decision. You know, it would be like if you were someone who is in the position where you could not afford to own a car, and then you got the stimulus check from COVID. You're like, I'm going to use this to help me buy a car. And it's like, well, now your finances are utterly fucked, because it costs a lot of money to own and maintain a car. Like, you just cannot spend money that is not something you can rely on to acquire things that cost to maintain. And it's just one of those places where companies act like they live in a different world where money doesn't mean the things that money means, and that works for them for a short period of time. And then whenever there becomes then a downturn and there's actual pressure, it's like, money means things again. We can't just do anything we want with whatever money we have. And so now they have to fire a bunch of people and lay everybody off. And this is like the number one thing that has caused the mass, hundreds of thousands of layoffs we've seen across the industry over the past 5 years, is that there was a giant, massive fucking hiring spree right after COVID. And then all that money dried up, and they're like, well, shit, now we have to let all these people go. And it has like just utterly tanked the job market in the West for video games, and it's totally fucked.
I want to challenge the verb have to do all these things.
Sure.
I understand.
They feel they have to, yes.
I understand there are fiscal realities. I'm not going to sit here and say that there's no reason I could never imagine a valid financial reason for layoffs or, downsizing or whatever, of course. I do think that the fact that Sony's leadership team at PlayStation is still pretty much the same as it was back then is an absolute affront, because that's the thing. To the people whose jobs it is to make all these decisions, it is fake money. It is fake. They don't care. They're not losing their jobs. They're not losing money. They're not losing anything. And that's part of what is crazy about this and our labor laws as part of that. Just, again, 8 studios, 3 closed completely, 2 others with big layoffs. That's insane. Absolutely insane. Yeah. And then I think finally, also as part of this, I think we need to have a serious talk about Sony's absolutely abysmal slate of first-party releases this generation. I went ahead and did year by year a list of retail games put out by PlayStation Studios. I'm including cross-gen titles, so if it came out on PS4 and PS5, but I'm not doing remasters or remakes. These are internally developed games, not ones Sony has published, but were developed by people outside of their auspices, like Stellar Blade or something like that. Okay? And I guess actually that means Demon's Souls.
Yeah, the first one on this list doesn't count in that. I think you have.
Although Demon's Souls is an IP they own, so I don't know how you do that, because.
Go through your list so that we could, because I think I've got a little bit of a disagreement on how you put together the list, but I want you to go through what you have, and then we can look at it.
I guess I just also want to say, though, this is an active criticism that a lot of people have had of this generation. This is not me pulling this out of a hat. This is part of the conversation, and I think it is a valid conversation to have. Because I do think when you run this next to the PS4 numbers, it's very night and day. So anyway, in 2020, I put Demon's Souls, maybe you include it, maybe you don't. Sackboy from Sumo Digital, Spider-Man Miles Morales from Insomniac, and Astro's Playroom from Japan Studio. Astro's Playroom being kind of how do you do that? That's not a game that you bought. It was just included. Yeah, but there you go. 2021, MLB The Show 21 from San Diego Studio, Returnal from Housemarque, and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart from Insomniac. 2022, God of War Ragnarok from Santa Monica, Gran Turismo 7 from Polyphony, Horizon Forbidden West from Guerrilla, and MLB The Show 22 from San Diego Studio. 2023, Spider-Man 2 from Insomniac, and MLB The Show 23 from San Diego. 2024, Astrobot from Team Asobi, Concord from Firewalk, which was closed immediately after and the game shut down, Helldivers 2 from Arrowhead, Lego Horizon, I'm not sure if you would count that or not. It's kind of developed by Guerrilla, but I think broadly developed by a studio called Studio Gobo, working with the Lego company. I'm not sure the exact division of labor there, but it's at least a Sony IP. And MLB The Show 24. There's an MLB The Show game every year, if you didn't know.
And I will point out that Arrowhead is not owned by Sony, so Helldivers 2 technically wouldn't count.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, we'll put that off the list. All right. Ghost of Yotei in 2025, along with MLB The Show 25. Death Stranding 2, you can also debate because they don't own Kojima Productions, but it is an exclusive PlayStation release, although there is a PC port of that now and of Death Stranding 1. Are the PC ports published by Sony too for Death Stranding, or does Kojima publish those themselves?
Not the first one. I don't know about the second one, but I don't think they published the PC port for the second one.
Okay, so definitely not full Sony exclusives. All right, and then in 2026, all we've had so far is God of War: Sons of Sparta, but we're promised to get Wolverine from Insomniac, Marvel Tokone, MLB The Show 26, and Saros. The point being, I just, especially if you take out the annual MLB titles, I mean, that leaves multiple years where you've had one new PlayStation Studios game. I think it also makes clear just how much Insomniac has carried the brand this generation. We'll talk about that more later, too. I think it is fair that if you are someone who enjoys Sony games and you feel like there have been fewer new PlayStation Studios games this generation, I do think the math holds that up. You can quibble with how I put the list together, but I don't know. I don't think it's just a random feeling. I think the fact that they've been on this live service push, that they've been closing, that all these things have had an impact.
No, I mean, yes, it is definitely, it is less than the PS4, right? Like each generation is a little bit less than the last one. The quibble I have with the list is just the idea of limiting it exclusively to PlayStation Studio developed games that are like true blue first party. And the reason why I don't like that is just because I don't think that's ever really been Sony's actual like kind of approach. Like the thing that Sony historically has always been very good at is working with partner studios that they don't actually own. I think it's one of the problems that I have with the acquisitions is that like Sony doesn't need to buy a bunch of these studios, right? Like they don't need to buy Kojima Productions. They can work closely with Kojima Productions on a partnership and get Death Stranding, right? Because Death Stranding is made using the Decima engine, which is a Guerrilla Games designed internal technology, right? So there's obviously a deep cooperation there. And so I think like it's a very successful strategy they've historically had, right? Like they only owned Insomniac in like 2019. So all of Insomniac's PS2, PS3, PS4 games, almost all their PS4 games, I think other than Spider-Man, were all games that they made for Sony in partnership with Sony, but were not owned by Sony. Same with Bluepoint, right? When they made the Shadow of the Colossus remake, when they made the Demon's Souls remake, they were not Sony first-party studios, Sony's first-party studio, but they were working in close partnership with Sony. And they have had some really great examples of this generation. Helldivers 2 is obviously the most successful one, but they had that 1 year, 2024? Yeah, where they had Rise of the Ronin and Stellar Blade. I didn't play Stellar Blade because I didn't like the demo. Rise of the Ronin is a fucking great game. And so, like, I think one of the reasons why I think this acquisition thing has fallen really flat and not worked for them is because it is too much of Sony wanting to own all these studios and keep them internal, rather than continue their tradition of really great outreach and working with great partner studios, creating games like, that's what we'll talk about the Bloodborne stuff in a little bit, because that's obviously also a big thing that came out of all this news around Bluepoint. But that is not a game, From Software was not owned by Sony. But Bloodborne as a game would not exist almost certainly if it had not been for this partnership. And it's the same thing for later this year when Marvel Token Fighting Souls comes out. Sony doesn't own of that studio. But like this is obviously like a partnership, a game that would only exist because Sony's involved. And I think like that has always been one of Sony's greatest strengths in the industry. It's one of the reasons why when you play Astrobot, it's actually kind of shocking how like there's all these characters in that game that are cameos related to PlayStation's legacy, but are not PlayStation-owned IPs, because so much of Sony's legacy in the industry is as this like partner working with other studios, and this push they made post-COVID to acquire all these studios just was a total failure, right? I mean, there's a couple of these that were obviously smart, like Insomniac has worked really well, and we know that Insomniac was struggling. They had that like they were making all those VR games and stuff like that, and that was not panning out for them. And obviously Housemarque is another one where that was a studio that was really financially struggling. They independently pursued a live service game that did not pan out, that never even saw release. And so a couple of these acquisitions maybe make sense for studios were really good, that were in a really harsh financial situation and needed additional support. And for some of those, it's worked out. But by and large, I think Sony should keep its sort of more, quote unquote, like kind of second party strategy, because that has been very successful. Because if you look at 2024 and you include all that stuff, you've got Astrobot Concord, not so great, Helldivers 2, Lego Horizons Adventures, MLB The Show 24, Rise of the Ronin, and Stellar Blade. Like, that's a really great lineup overall of games that are Sony exclusive games. Some of them may come to PC later, but it's the thing that like helps give them that sense of identity. And I'm just pointing this out because I remember feeling like in 2024, oh, like they've kind of turned this around a lot. Like they've got a lot of games coming out this year. I played a bunch of those. I really loved all the ones that I played. And I think that is the thing that Sony excels at, that they should continue to pursue rather than this mass consolidation and acquisition spree that they had been on.
I agree with all of that, and I'm glad you pointed that out, because that's true. And obviously this goes back to the PlayStation 1 and having, like,
yes.
good... Obviously some of that was striking while the iron was hot, because Nintendo kind of fucked up with the N64 and some of that stuff, but being able to get, like, Square Enix on board, and or Square, it wasn't Enix yet. But actually, you know what? They got Square and Enix on board, yes, because they got both Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest on their system. But, like, yeah. No. This is absolutely true. I do also think, though, it is worthwhile to look at, like, what have their internal developers put out, because, again, it is not, like, I'm not wrong in pointing out that it's anemic in this way. Again, like, just an easy example of this is Naughty Dog had 4 games on the PS3, Uncharted 1, 2, 3, and Last of Us. They had 3 games on the PS4, Uncharted 4, Uncharted 5, / Lost Legacy, whatever you want to call that one, and Last of Us 2, and we'll see if they get... whatever this new Interstellar, what's it called?
Is it Interstellar or Intergalactic?
Whatever it is. We'll see if they get that out before the PS6 is a thing. I don't know. And that is a case where I think there's other stuff going on at Naughty Dog, but one of the things that went on at Naughty Dog was trying to do their live service Last of Us multiplayer thing that ate up years and never came out. So, like, this is a live issue, and this is, like, There just have been a lot of issues this generation, and I think the PS5 is a fantastic piece of hardware. I mostly enjoy using it. I also am a Nintendo gamer, and a lot of times when there's stuff that isn't super, like, graphically important that is on both, I wind up going to Nintendo. But obviously there would be nothing wrong with playing that stuff on PS5. So I'm not saying, like, if you've owned a PS5, there's been plenty of stuff to play because everything comes out on your PS5. That's what the PlayStation is it's like the default home console, especially now with the fall of Xbox, that, like, this is where stuff comes out and you can play stuff here. But I've also felt like, man, I did not use my PS5 a lot last year. I looked at, like, my own play chart, and, like, I think I played 3 retail games last year on PS5, which was Forza Horizon 5, Gears of War Remastered, so 2 Xbox games, and then Doom the Dark Ages. And then this year I've played Resident Evil Requiem. But, like, yeah, it's just... all of these choices that they're making have had real impact on, like, how the console feels to people. And I think people feeling like this generation has been kind of a lost generation, which also has been the predominant feeling over on the Xbox side of things, I think there's a point to that criticism.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think, like, what we've really seen is like, it feels like, it'd actually be interesting to do the full math on this, but it just kind of feels like across console generations, studio output, like, decreases by half, because, like, most of these big studios, like Sucker Punch, Guerrilla, Naughty Dog, if you only include, like, full-priced full games and you kind of put a Lost Legacy to the side, most of them put out 2 games, right? One right near the beginning, like Infamous Second Son, and then right near the end with Ghost of Tsushima. And in the PS5 generation, with the exception of Insomniac, which we could talk about because they're fucking crazy, they obviously have, like, the 2 kind of internal development teams that have been trading off, like, projects every 5 years, and then the smaller game with Miles Morales in there. With the exception of Insomniac, almost all these studios are almost certainly only going to put out 1 game in the PS5 generation. I mean, I guess, like, Guerrilla has this multiplayer game they're doing. I don't know how you count that, because that feels like that's a different thing. But, we're obviously not going to see whatever Horizon 3 is. Maybe Sony Santa Monica will get whatever their Cory Barlog game is. That is probably not a sequel to God of War Ragnarok. The most recent buzz is that it's something set in the world of God of War, but is not a, like, technically God of War game. Like, it's in the IP, but it's, like, a different characters or something. Maybe. But
also, God of War Ragnarok was, like, very clearly a PS4 game that then got ported up to the PS5. Like, yeah.
Yeah. But regardless, like, within the, like, releases in the timeline of the PS5, because also the cross-gen thing is another thing that complicates this, where, like, what is a generation anymore? fucking, I don't know. It's like, it feels like that idea of like the generation is dead. But like, you know, all those studios that released a game right near the beginning of the console, maybe they will get one out that is like before we get whatever a PS6 is. And if they do, it's probably because the PS6 is going to come out later than it was originally going to come out. But the bigger question is like, what does that mean when your studios are only putting out one game or one like full priced big game every 7 to 8 years? Like, does that make sense? Can you manage that?
It doesn't.
In what world can you do this? And you know, this is obviously, that's not an exclusive Sony problem, because this is the thing that we see, like Ubisoft and EA have just shat themselves this whole generation, where they're, you know, they can barely put out a video game. Microsoft obviously in their studios have tremendously struggled with this. Who God knows how long Fable has been in development, and that team, you know, it seems like that game might finally come out. But it is just this position where these Western AAA studios, like, not everybody's fucking Rockstar, and nobody is Rockstar other than Rockstar. Rockstar can take 8 years to put out their next video game because their video game is going to sell more than any other video game in the entire world. It's like, it just doesn't make sense. Meanwhile, you look at all these Japanese studios, like Capcom is just putting out Resident Evils like a motherfucker, you know? Like, they're putting out so many games with it, you know. And then obviously like Sony has been doing really well with like the Yuga Gotoku or Like a Dragon games.
You said
like,
Sony, you meant RGG Studios?
Or sorry, Sega.
Okay.
Sega's doing really well. Atlas is doing really well. Fucking Konami. Like, Konami's kicking ass. Konami's, you know, a lot of them are obviously not internally developed, but they're doing this great job of working with external partners, and they've got all these fucking Silent Hill games coming out that people love. And it is fascinating because it just feels like a complete reverse of what the 360 PS3 generation was, where Japanese developers really struggled to get out games, and Western developers were doing incredibly well. And now it's just this, like, all these Japanese developers are just fucking running circles around what used to be these like big, reliable, heavy hitters in the AAA industry in the West, both at Sony and at other publishers. And it's just fucking crazy.
And in addition to obviously all of those, there's just all of Nintendo too, yes. Right? And all of them. Right. And you know, again, all of this is inseparable from the layoffs and the financial mistakes and all of that stuff. Because look, a huge part of this, like, if you want to know why a Capcom or a Nintendo can reliably get games out in their beloved franchises, it's because the people who've worked on those games historically are there and can, like, help build the next one and, like, train a new team. And, like, there's an institutional history and there's reliable people there and all of that kind of stuff. And, you know, I think the clearest example of this in the West is probably Halo and 343, but now Halo Studios. And, like, a big part of their complete inability to make Halo games is the various rounds of layoffs and the fact that they exclusively work with contractors who are only there for a year or two, who they then stop working with because of they don't want to like give them health benefits and stuff. Yeah. And so there's no sense of team camaraderie or institutional knowledge or any of that builds up. And then you know, later on, there's obviously also the issue of just like the scale of games and kind of the race for various kinds of graphical fidelity over everything else. And there's lots of factors here. But yeah, the scenario where you have a studio go from 4 games a generation to 2 games a generation to maybe 1, that only subdivides so many times. And eventually You're just not making video games. And if you have a 7-year console generation plan, that console generation plan now makes absolutely no sense. And so, like, yeah, this is a really, really big live issue. But, like, that's the thing. Like, the PS4 was in some ways a decrease, but I don't think anyone who lived through the PS4 generation feels like there was a dearth of content. There was still plenty of stuff. And, like, yeah, we can quibble about I count Uncharted The Lost Legacy in the Naughty Dog counter because Uncharted The Lost Legacy is every bit as big a game as Uncharted 1, 2, 3. So I feel like if you're comparing from PS3 to 4, it's a fair comparison. And then you go now and we're still, maybe there will be one. But, like, that's the question. And there is proof even within Sony that this can work thanks to Insomniac, who we'll talk about in a little bit. And so, you know, I do think there's ways forward. There are obvious lessons to learn here. Some of this is just the way the Western horrific form of capitalism we practice is done. But yeah, it's fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the PS4 generation, one thing I will point out, because I think it's easy to memory hold this, but when I'm looking at like the list of games, it is easy to forget that like it took until about 2016 before that really kicked off. I mean, this is not just true for Sony. This is like, we had that other, like, a much smaller version of this, but we had that, like, at the end of the 360 PS3 generation, there was the rise of mobile gaming, right? There was this, like, big controversy around, like, are consoles going to be successful? Is this going to be a thing? Microsoft and Sony and all these companies started investing in mobile apps and the second screen experience and trying to make mobile game versions of their stuff and all this shit. And so they moved a lot of investment out of traditional console development for those games. And so 2014 in particular is like infamous as this year that was incredibly thin. I mean, still, Sony still had Drive Club, Infamous Second Son, Little Big Planet 3. And Last of Us Remastered, if you want to count that as a remaster. So that's still like a decent little number of games. But also a lot of those did not, Little Big Planet 3 is the least liked of the original Little Big Planets. Drive Club is Drive Club. But Infamous Second Son, that's a really good game. But that was the year when like Dragon Age Inquisition won all the Game of the Year awards, almost as a consolation prize, and because nobody owned a fucking Wii U, and like the Wii U actually had games. But like we saw like a small version of this, I feel like, at the beginning of the PS4 generation, and then by 2016 it really turns around, and that's where you get like, I think, what we think of as the kind of like modern Sony exclusives becoming more regular thing. So yeah, it's kind of
but we're not at the beginning of the generation. Yes. We're at theoretically the end, the tail end of it, right? In a normal timeline, where we would be like a year or two. We would be next year would be the planned release for the So we're not at the end. We're at we're not at the beginning. We're near the end, and it's a weird situation. You're right about that with the PS4, but like the other thing to say here is that the PS5 kind of remarkably has sold exactly like the PS4. Yes. Like, it is eerie when you look at the historical sales data and you go like, how much had the PS4 sold at the end of its fourth year? And then you look at PS5 at the end of its fourth year and it's like an identical number. And right now, where we are in the fifth or sixth year, again, identical numbers. So the PS5 has done just as well, despite like obviously higher costs, some of these, a less density of like exclusive titles, some of this stuff. I think part of that is that they have no competition in that space this generation, right? Like, if you just want the default console, last generation you could reasonably be choosing between Xbox One and PS4. No one's making that calculus anymore, especially now that like Xbox has effectively pulled out of trying to fight that with all of their price hikes. So PS5 is definitely picking up some of that. But also, like, yeah, it is the default console. It is a very good place to play games. All of that stuff is true. I do think, like, Sony has to figure out this other shit if they want that momentum to continue, because inertia is not going to be enough forever. And I think right now we're on kind of an inertia pattern.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and obviously there's the bigger, more existential question of, like, can you even release another device like this? The current market, Valve said no. Right? They're like, I don't know, we'll try to put out hardware maybe someday, who knows? And the bigger question of like, will that ever turn around? It just turns out it's been a shit time for video games. There are a lot of external reasons for that, and there are also a lot of internal mistakes made at a lot of these big publishing houses like Sony.
Speaking of internal mistakes made, on February 20th...
Wait, we can't move on yet, because we haven't talked about the Bloodborne thing. We have to at least address the Bloodborne thing. Just because this has been like the biggest drama online from this somehow is honestly not even the Bluepoint thing. Totally eclipsed is the scales falling from the eyes of a lot of people who've been very willfully ignorant forever about the situation around Bloodborne and why is there not a remaster or a patch or a remake, and just being like, it's just free money, just do it. And the obvious reality that has always been there, which is that Sony can't just do it on its own, and that From Software is not just going to do it on their own, that it's two companies that have to both decide to work together to do a thing. And if that's ever the situation, it ain't fucking getting done. unless it's something that's going to make some real money. And it's just, it is the one little piece of gratification I have is, and I love Bloodborne. I would love for there to be a better performing version of Bloodborne, just a simple 60 FPS patch. That would be lovely. That would be nice. But I've just been driven insane by the people fucking just never shutting the fuck up about it, to the point where I'm like, do you guys even like Bloodborne? Like why are you so obsessed about this patch for a game that apparently you hate because it just performs so terribly you can't even deal with it? I'm like, I think, obviously I would love a better performing version of the game. Well, Bloodborne's one of the best PS4 games. It's one of the From Software's best games. Even if it does run like shit, all their games ran like shit. It's been fascinating to see like all these people who've just been like barking madly at the moon about this Bloodborne shit get what is just, again, I think a patently obvious answer to the question of why hasn't this happened. It's because you need both of these parties to agree on what form does it take, who does what, right? For people asking for like a patch to the game from Sony, it's like, who is, like, I don't know if Sony ever does that. Does Sony ever just decide we're going to make a patch for somebody else's video game and just force it through? I don't know if that's a thing that ever occurs. Maybe.
Well, do they own the code? Like, they would need to own, like, obviously they have IP rights, but the code, like, the code is with FromSoft, right? Like, it's at their offices. Like, it's not just on a server that Sony can pull out and start fucking with. I assume that'd be weird, right?
Yes. And so it is like it's just a crazy avenue for this information to finally have gotten out here in a way that feels like confirmed. There was an interview with Shuhei Yoshida, who's an ex-Sony executive, a year, maybe 2 years ago, where he kind of said this without saying it directly because he couldn't say it directly, but he kind of said something like, I think Miyazaki-san wants to still do something with Bloodborne, and Sony really respects their relationship with him, and it's like kind of equivocating this, like, obviously it's just the fucking both companies have to decide on how this works and how to do it, and it's just like, if you've ever dealt with any level of bureaucracy ever in your life, that that's just like an immovable wall. Again, unless there's like a lot of money and a big project to actually be made out of it. Whereas this one little 60 FPS patch or whatever it is, that it's just a really like weird specific detail that came out from this whole sordid affair.
It's also, I really resent the framing that I've seen. And I don't think Jason Schreier intended this, but I do think some of the like tweets and skeets, whatever you call them on Blue Sky, that came out from this kind of made it, I think if you were not closely reading this, it sounded like, and I think some people construed it as, oh, FromSoft shivved Bluepoint and now they didn't have a project and therefore that. It's like, no, one, like, look, I love Bluepoint and I love their Demon's Souls remake. I think that is a remarkable title. I think it's one of the, if not the best PS5 exclusives. It's remarkable. But also, Bloodborne was made by FromSoft, and if the people at FromSoft don't want someone else to remake it, I think they have every right. And I don't even mean legally, because I think Sony could, if they wanted to do this, is the understanding. But I understand why Sony wouldn't, because why piss off one of your best possible partners? But also, I artistically, I just think it would be wrong. If Miyazaki and the team don't want someone else doing a Bloodborne thing, they have every right to say that. And that does not then give Sony the right to say, well, Bluepoint, you're done, which isn't exactly how it happened either. But yeah, I also think, like, guys, let's be real for a fucking second. We don't need remakes of games that are playable on the fucking PS5.
Yes. Yeah.
For the love of God, we had this conversation with the stupid fucking Last of Us remake. Like, shut up. It's playable. Like, would it be nice if FromSoft went in there and rejiggered the tech so we could have 4K 60 FPS? It would. But if you liked the game on the PS4, it's still on the PS5, it's fine. We don't need a bunch of manpower to the thing with Demon's Souls is that was a PS3 locked game that you could not play on your PS4 or PS5. So when it came to PS5, that was really cool in case you never owned a PS3, or you didn't currently have access to one, or you didn't want to hook up an old-ass console because they don't work so great anymore. And it didn't have online play anymore, and online is cool for these games, and hey, the online in Bloodborne still works. So, like, everyone shut the fuck up. I'm in that mood right now about this.
Yes, no, that's exactly how I've come to feel about it as well. That's like, it would be nice to have the patch version. I really don't need a remake. And also, I don't have a problem with the minor controversy or whatever around specific artistic changes in the Demon Souls remake. It doesn't bother me. Like, I like the art design in the original Demon Souls, but I don't think it's like the most incredible art design in a video game I've ever seen. The art design in Bloodborne is maybe the most incredible art design in a video game I've ever seen. And I do think that, like, whoever does it, honestly, even FromSoft doing it, I don't really want anyone to do a full graphical remake. I don't think it's like the art design of that game is so good. It's so particular. It's so specific. I just don't think there's a way of doing a full, we're going to do the graphics are done in UE5 or fucking whatever it is, like the Oblivion Remastered and all these kinds of remakes. Or the Metal Gear Solid 3 one that just came out, right? These are becoming relatively common these days. It's like, I just don't think there's any way to capture the look of that game in that process. The only thing I would want is just the frame rate to be better, but I can deal with the frame rate not being amazing. And it's like, it does feel weird that people have just sort of like so memory hold the entire history of video games at this point that they don't remember that video games never ran well on consoles. Like, there's a nice bright spot in the PS2 era where you got like a good number of 60 FPS games, but like if you play games through the 360 PS3 era, fucking nothing ran well, man. Everything ran like a piece of shit, and it was fine. I mean, Dark Souls, amazing game. If you tried to, play the original version of Dark Souls on Xbox 360 and you go to the kind of poison area, Undeadburg, it's just fucked. It's totally fucked.
Don't you mean Blighttown?
Blighttown, yes, thank you. Yeah, Blighttown, where you have all like the rickety wooden buildings, and then you go down to the swamp. It's like, the performance is completely fucked, but that back in the day, that was part of the charm of that game. Like, people talked about it almost fondly, and I kind of have fond memories of I could barely control my character because the frame rate's tanking. And Bloodborne's not even like that. The thing with Bloodborne is it's got the inconsistent frame pacing on the 30 FPS lock, which means that it's got a little bit of stuttering. You get used to it. Millions of people got used to it. It's an incredibly beloved game for a reason. And I think there's a lot of people kind of robbing themselves the opportunity of just playing the game and enjoying it by being so hyper fixated on, I need the 60 FPS version of this thing, and it's just consumed the discussion around this amazing game in a way that has started to fucking slowly drive me insane.
Elden Ring also didn't run at a consistent 60 FPS unless you did the weird hack of buying the PS4 version and running it on your PS5 in backwards compatibility mode. Does this mean Bluepoint should have been hired to make an Elden Ring remake? Should we have done that? Should we have done the PS5 remake of a PS5 game because it didn't run at a perfect 60 FPS? Is that because that's where the logic of the Bloodborne thing takes us naturally, right?
Yeah. It's just like, I think people have gotten so accustomed to this generation of having pretty decent 60 FPS modes on almost every game, which is awesome. But it does mean that when they're confronted with a game that doesn't have that, or just the narrative around it, it's not even like the reality of the product itself, I think, for most people. Because I just don't think that the vast majority of people are even that sensitive to it, really. It's a curse of knowledge that because you know about these numbers, you've seen videos about it and stuff, you can't divorce your experience from it. And we've seen this with some games like Alan Wake 2, Star Wars Jedi Survivor on console had this problem of where people just refused to accept playing on the 30 FPS mode. If they had, it ran totally fine. Both of those are incredible games. I enjoyed them tremendously, but I just say, I'm just going to play them on the 30 FPS mode and accept that and just play the fucking game and not spend the whole time thinking about the technical specifications behind it. And I do think that, like, I love a lot of the work that people like Digital Foundry and other tech YouTubers do online. And I do not think that this stuff is their fault, but there are people who like kind of take that shit and let it ruin the experience of video games rather than letting it enhance the experience of video games, and it's a very sad thing to see.
I agree. And like, and I think this is a weird legacy. And again, not saying this is the fault of this thing, but it's a weird legacy of the PS4 Pro, which is that the PS4 Pro is when because again, if you had a base PS4, you didn't have to think about this because you didn't get to, because you didn't have graphics options, just as that had been the case with all consoles up until then. And then the PS4 Pro is the first time you had as a regular, obviously there were one-offs in gaming history, but like as a regular thing, you had like choices in front of you, which means you had to start to learn about these things, and you had to start considering trade-offs, and that's continued into the PS5 generation. And I mostly think that's a good thing. Like, if you're informed and you can have trade-offs and you can be a fucking adult about it. Right?
Yes.
Like, because, there are absolutely games I am happy to play at 30 FPS because there's other priorities I have. Like, my brother thinks I'm crazy for this, but I've always played Forza Horizon 5 at 30 FPS because that game looks so gorgeous. I'm mainly playing that game because I think it looks, I enjoy the racing, but also, like, it looks fucking gorgeous. And I think there's too many cutbacks to get to 60. And you might say, like, but racing games need to be at 60. But that studio has, like, the best motion blur implementation I've ever seen on a 30 FPS mode. So I'm good with it. And, like, we can be adults about it, right? Please?
Yeah. People can just enjoy video games the way they want. And it's fine.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of enjoying video games, the way that you ruined my transition, Sean, because we had to talk about Bloodborne.
But I desperately needed to get the Bloodborne thing off my chest because it's one little piece of levity I have is making fun of the people who just can't shut the fuck up about Bloodborne.
We're gonna get nasty comments on this one. That's okay. All right, you don't have to. I have to deal with them. You don't have to. All right. On February 20th, Microsoft announced a major shakeup at Xbox. Phil Spencer has retired effective February 23rd, so he's gone. Xbox President Sarah Bond, widely seen as his expected successor, resigned on the 20th, on the day of this announcement. And the new CEO of Microsoft Gaming is Asha Sharma, who has zero video game industry experience. Sharma is 37 years old. I don't know, man. I'm 33. I don't put me in charge of Microsoft. That feels too young.
I'm 33 years old. Please put me in charge of Microsoft.
You could do it better. That's true. Either of us, that's true.
Either I could do a better job or I can burn it down. But, like, if I burn it down, all these people who burn this shit down get, like, $1 billion afterwards.
That's true.
Like, please. I'll do a terrible job and then make ungodly amounts of money and ruin the world with all the money I have. This is the arc that all these people go on. Let me participate.
Yeah, okay, never mind. We would like to submit our names for contention, Microsoft. Anyway, Sharma, as I was saying, is 37. She has been at Microsoft for 2 years running the Core AI product. That's the team behind the Azure AI Studio and developer tools for Copilot. But I have seen it, like, overstated, the amount of, like, her history with AI. This is not someone who, like, comes from the world of AI. She actually was previously the COO of Instacart, VP of product at Meta, where she ran Messenger and Instagram Direct. She's also on the board of Home Depot. She is, like, a C-suite person who, like, goes around.
She's a professional executive.
Yeah, she's a professional executive. She does not seem to have, like, any rich experience in any, again, Instacart, Meta, Core AI. These are all broadly tech, but they're very different things. So this is not someone who, like, and I think this is important, is not coming into this with, like, an ideological project, I would assume, other than doing what Microsoft wants. So, put a pin in that. The Verge did a big report on all of this that had some interesting details. So while passing over Sarah Bond was a surprise to the outside world, where that just seemed like the next name on the org chart, it was actually expected and even welcomed within Xbox. Bond, who the Xbox marketing team directly responded to, was the person in charge of the This Is an Xbox campaign, which a lot of people have made fun of outside of Xbox. Apparently inside Xbox, that is even more hated. Maybe for good reason, if you're saying, like, I came here to work on Xbox, and the marketing line now is that nothing is an Xbox. That's kind of weird. So here's quoting The Verge. Most of the current and former Xbox employees I've spoken to in recent days are relieved that Bond is leaving Microsoft. I've heard from multiple sources that Bond has been tough to work with and built a team structure that meant if you don't follow the vision or questioned it, you were out. Most have praised her ability to strike partnerships with companies and developers, though. The Verge also wrote that Phil Spencer's retirement has seemed inevitable to Xbox employees, particularly over the past year. In February last year, so 2025, Spencer took a long vacation, and I'm told some teams had to wait weeks for sign-off on some key changes. Shortly after this vacation, rumors started circulating inside Microsoft that Spencer was getting ready to retire. Microsoft was eventually forced to deny the rumors in July of 2025, claiming Spencer wouldn't be retiring anytime soon. All that being said, the reporting also says that Xbox employees are concerned about the Sharma appointment due to her lack of experience in gaming and entertainment and her ties to the AI side of Microsoft, which apparently all Microsoft employees hate. It's just the people in the C-suite that are into it. So yeah, Sean, I mean, obviously, here's my 2 cents. A shakeup needed to happen. Phil Spencer and Sarah Bond, like, look, I'm not going to get on the weird blue sky train of, like, did we pass over someone? But I don't know. They both were bad. Like, look, Phil Spencer, and this is, I think, a blind spot in a lot of reporting, is I've heard from a lot of people who work in video games journalism that Spencer was very nice, was very good with, like, journalists, that obviously he knew gaming, he was, like, sociable and good with the press. And look, that's all good, and he should deserve praise for all of that. His tenure is a failure. Again, just think about you at your job. If you had failed for as long as you have in your job as Spencer did in his, would you still have your job? And the answer is no. So, like, this guy, I think, needed to go. Clearly, I think Sarah Bond clearly needed to go from everything we've heard. But then we have the kind of out of the frying pan into the fire scenario of jumping from people who were doing a bad job, but at least seemed to like video games, to someone who has maybe, from what I can tell, never played a game. I don't care about that so much as having no industry experience in entertainment running the thing, who also is coming from the AI team, who seems to be kind of a mouthpiece for the larger Microsoft project, which is not good at this moment. And yeah, I don't know. It seems like we could be going from bad to worse. What do you think, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, I think we almost certainly will be. And the fortunate reality is that that's just what Microsoft is. And it doesn't change the fact that, like, you know, that Phil Spencer's regime needed to change. Yeah, it's just like the reality is also that Microsoft is not equipped to do anything better. I think Satya Nadella just seems to have a burning passion to try to destroy the company with his, like, mad push for AI and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, Asha Sharma definitely strikes me as this kind of modern day style executive that is the kind of person who has no real interest or concern in the specific product or the specific industry. They are there to just be an executive and do executive stuff. And in this case is being an executive who's the head of one team that's part of a much bigger company, one of the biggest companies. You know, that kind of person is just going to be a mouthpiece for whatever the people from on high tell them. And this is just, I think, how all these fucking companies are run these days. We've talked about this with, like, movie companies and stuff, where it used to be the suits at least were people who wanted, like, the prestige of, I run a movie company and I do the movie studio stuff and I like the movies and I'll get to, like, mingle with the actors, all that shit.
Yeah, I mean, until very recently, movie studio execs liked movies. It's the industry they wanted to work in. It's an industry they would have risen through. It's like an industry they had passion for. Like, honestly, as weird as this sounds, Ted Sarandos at Netflix is kind of more like an old school movie exec because he likes movies and can talk to you about them. That's a very different picture than, like, David Zaslav or someone like that, or Larry Ellison now. With I forgot to put that on the outline. We'll go into that in a minute here.
I thought you left it out of the outline on purpose because you just didn't want to fucking talk about it because it's too depressing. But if you
no, we'll do that next. Fuck it, yeah. Go on.
But yes, and you know, I think it's video games have had this for a long time, of where either it was someone who specifically was interested in games, like Phil Spencer clearly was, or at least it's someone who's on the tech side of things, and there's someone who's very interested in technology and the technology industry, and that's how they end up being an executive for the company. And, you know, and just Asha Sharma reads to me like a person who is this more modern version of an executive who doesn't, you know, it could be whatever, and she will do it. She wants to be an executive, and that's the job she wants, not an executive who runs a video game company or a technology company specifically. You know, and it's you know, hey, like Phil Spencer, at least the dude liked video games. Like, that's a nice thing. And the dude was knowledgeable about video games. You know, it doesn't mean that he did a great job at Xbox. But it's the thing of, like, you know, he was affable. He cared about Xbox. He cared about that legacy. He cared about those things. And he did do some interesting things at Xbox, particularly at the end of the Xbox One generation, that were cool policies, like the backwards compatibility team and stuff like that. You know, he also then was the guy who, you know, saw through the Game Pass thing, which is probably, if I were to identify one thing that murdered Xbox, or the first drop of poison it took under Phil Spencer's tenure, it would be Game Pass. Which, you know, at the time, there were a lot of people like myself who looked at it and thought, this is never really going to work long term. It doesn't really make sense for how video games work. And they were so aggressive about trying to push Game Pass that a lot of people, you know, got into it because it was like, oh, you can get it for $1 or whatever. And then now that the reality has come back, that's like, well, no, it just cannot be the thing that Microsoft wanted it or pitched it to be. It's just one of those projects that sunk the company. I think, like, the Activision purchase is a thing that has just kind of killed at least the tradition of what Xbox was, and Activision kind of swallowed Xbox more than Xbox swallowed Activision in some ways. So there are a lot of things that happened over Spencer's tenure that I think just basically kind of sunk the Xbox brand in what it was. And big plays he made that just did not work, and I think a lot of them, to me, didn't really make sense. And I'm sure some of that was him trying to play to again, those soft pressures from on high of Nadella and the things he was looking at when he was all about subscriptions, and now he's all about AI, because these people don't have a fucking attention span. In a couple of years, they will be on some other thing that has to be the thing that this company must do, and we must just change and destroy everything we've ever done in order to do this specific thing. And we have to rename our flagship product to reflect this new strategy, which they did with Microsoft Office 365 when it was all subscriptions, and now it has to all be Copilot AI, right? It's just these fucking executives, they're fucking awful. And you know, Phil Spencer, his tenure just did not work for Xbox. You know, the Sarah Bond stuff, you know, I do think that there is a certain smell on that Verge report you get of this kind of classic thing of where it feels like overly convenient how much of the one side of the story on Sarah Bond we get, of the, like, all the things that were bad and people don't want her there. I think she is being scapegoated to a certain extent by Microsoft as a person who is out of the company, who was someone who's clearly being kind of brought up to be Phil Spencer's successor. The problem with that, though, is that if she is an instrumental part of that regime that made those choices, like, if you're trying to change that regime, it doesn't make sense to take on that regular successor anyways. And I'm sure that, you know, I'm sure she was in charge of the This Is an Xbox ad campaign, which was an absolute clusterfuck disaster. Probably something that I imagine if you are someone in taking, like, marketing classes, that has to be like an instructional bad example historically in the history of marketing, how insane that ad campaign was. But also, that ad campaign was just an extension of the shit that Phil Spencer said at the end of, like, every E3 press conference for 5 years when E3 press conferences were still a thing. We covered those on this podcast. Every E3 press conference since, like, 2016, when Phil Spencer came on, ended with him giving a big pie-in-the-sky speech about how there were billions of gamers around the world and they just don't know it. And what we have to do is reach those gamers, and how we do it is with the cloud and mobile and blah and blah and blah. And it's like, that's the mission that Sarah Bond was given, was I need to go make the fucking mobile store app thing that never happened because of all the shit with Apple and the iPhone, and that, you know, the laws around that didn't change enough in the EU for her to get that store on the App Store. And this whole pitch of, like, the cloud, and that's what This Is an Xbox is trying to communicate a message about how you do not need this platform because you can access this platform anywhere. And that's what Phil Spencer's whole strategy always was. And it never made sense, because the whole time on this podcast we talked about how those billions of people he's talking about are not interested in playing fucking Gears of War and Halo and Forza. They're people like my mom. My mom is someone who would never tell you she plays video games. I actually had this conversation with her a few weeks ago, where I said that, like, yeah, you play games, Mom. She's like, no, I don't. I'm like, yes, you do. You play video games every day. It's just you play Wordle, and you play Solitaire on your iPad, and you play a Scrabble, like, on your phone. It's like, those are all video games. It's just a different kind of video game, and she's never like, I don't care if like, oh, it can play on an app on my TV. She's never gonna fucking play a Halo or like a Microsoft Studios video game. It's never going to happen. Those aren't the kinds of games she's interested in. And so that pitch that he had never made sense. It was never going to work. It's exactly the same thing with Game Pass as this strategy that needed to have like hundreds of millions of people buy into it for it to make sense. And it's like, that's just an insane path to walk. And so, Sarah Bond, yes, I'm sure she was in charge of those things, and those are strategies that did not work out. But I did just find it I was just a little bit skeptical of some of the reporting of how, like, that line does not get connected up the chain to the guy who was her boss. And it feels just very convenient how the extent to which she has been scapegoated in this whole affair.
No, of course. And that's absolutely true. But I do think it's important to remember that, like, and this is why I think the Phil Spencer of it all, this is where I've been frustrated with the reporting, is like, I don't care how much access he gave you as a journalist. If that's what you're talking about in the stories about his exit, is how good he was at access, that's how we get, like, the press favoring Donald Trump over Kamala Harris, because he gives more press conferences. And I'm not comparing Phil Spencer to Donald Trump. By all accounts, Phil Spencer is a nice guy. But that is irrelevant in the conversation of whether or not he's done a good job running Xbox, which he hasn't done. And, like, that's the thing that matters in your reporting. The point of your access is to learn more about the studio, not to praise the guy giving you the access. Does that make sense? Like, that's yes. What I mean here. And the fact that, like, Spencer isn't getting the shit, but Bond is. Bond probably deserves some of the shit, but that she's getting it and not Spencer is fucked up, absolutely.
Yeah, and this is just the kind of thing that happens in these transitions, is that you always get, like, one of the people gets sort of labeled as again, that kind of scapegoat role, and you get this, like, reporting that's probably not technically inaccurate, but it is biased or limited to a very specific kind of point of view, because it's only the certain kinds of people that reporter is getting access to for their sources. And you're not really getting the bigger picture, especially because this is a story that was published like a day or two after it happened. And I'm not blaming Tom Warren at The Verge who wrote it. It's just, you need to always go into this kind of reporting so soon after the fact, understanding that you're getting exposed to what is a lot of internal drama happening within that company. And you have to look at it with a certain level of skepticism and think about the broader context. If you want, like, a really good conversation about this from this perspective of someone who's been in the scene for a long time, Jeff Gerstmann on his podcast, on the Jeff Gerstmann Show from a week or two ago when this news dropped, he had a really great talk where he looked at it from that perspective and talked about having been participant to these kinds of big corporate meltdowns when he was fired at GameSpot and all this kind of stuff, but also someone who has reported on and seen it in previous game studios from that historical perspective. Because I just saw too many people running with the Sarah Bond narrative and just eating it immediately and not asking any critical questions about what are the things that aren't being said here in this transition.
So shifting into talking about the future, Sean, I also think there's been too much attention on, like, or discussion of, who is Asha Sharma? What does she want? What's she got? I kind of think that's irrelevant. She is, as you were explaining earlier, Sean, she's this kind of executive who, like, the question isn't what Asha Sharma wants. The question is what Satya Nadella wants, and, like, and what Microsoft as a whole wants to do with this. Because this isn't, I mean, you can't even say this is someone who's coming in with, like, some vision for gaming as a product, because they've never worked on it a day in their life. So, like, I think the question, and this is just one that I feel like very hard to even speculate about, is what does Microsoft want Xbox and or their games division to be? Do they want to be the West's biggest third-party publisher? Because they could shut down Xbox as a hardware thing and do that and basically just have Activision, Bethesda, Xbox Game Studios as an arm that is a publisher, and probably make a lot of money on that. If you put people in charge who are, like, good at game development and know how to do that. But does that fold into Microsoft's plan? Because that doesn't advance subscriptions. That doesn't advance Windows as a platform, really. It doesn't advance any of their AI shit. But the current Xbox project doesn't do any of those things either. So I'm really, like, Do they regret the $68 billion Activision acquisition? Is there any discussion within about spinning off the game stuff and just not having games be a part of Microsoft anymore? I feel like someone's at least, I'm not saying that's likely, but if that isn't a conversation that's happened just in terms of like considering the logistics of it, I'd be surprised. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, I think like, yeah, Microsoft is in just a strange spot because, and this is in part of Tom Warren's story on The Verge, he reports, and I very much believe this, that there are a lot of people within Microsoft that want the Xbox brand because it's one of the only consumer-facing brands they have that anyone gives a shit about. Even though it's been kind of thrown into the gutter relative to the rest of what's going on at Microsoft and their other products, which they are just like kind of intent on destroying. And Windows 11 is getting progressively worse and worse as time goes on. Like they're shoving Copilot into anything and everything they can possibly shove it into. You know, like as someone who there was last year, I used their, and it was not very good. But I had a specific reason for needing to use it. I used PowerPoint as my kind of slideshow software and specifically was using their kind of online Microsoft 365 platform for it, not just the, software installed onto your computer. The reason why I was doing that is I was teaching people who speak Spanish and not a lot of English, and PowerPoint had live subtitling that it could do, and that was fantastic. That feature has just become so fucking terrible. They've removed multiple pieces of functionality connected to that feature that have made it basically useless. And I don't teach those classes anymore, so I didn't at a certain point, I was like, I'm just not going to try to keep using this at all. I thought it would be nice because I do have a couple of what we call EBs, emerging bilinguals, but ESL students who are Spanish speakers natively and whose English is not fully developed yet. And it's nice to have some subtitles for them. But if it's only a couple of students in a class, I can manage that in different ways. And using PowerPoint was just fucking killing me. It's just a horrible program. And you use Google Slides, use Canva, use whatever. PowerPoint, particularly that version of it, that's their online app, which is the one that had the subtitles functionality, just atrocious. And it just got progressively worse and worse. And it's just, I don't understand. I just don't understand how Microsoft does it. I don't know how they take anything that's like cool or useful and slowly just bleed it until it's horrible. And it's just crazy. And that's kind of happened to Xbox as well to a certain extent. But like, Fable looks like a cool game. Forza Horizon 6 looks like a cool game. Gears of War Origins, or whatever the fuck they're calling it, that looks like a cool game. I don't know if all of them will be amazing. I don't know if I'll play any of them. Maybe I'll play some of them. But like, they do put out games that are cool and that people care about. And it's like the one thing that Microsoft does as a company that anyone gives a shit about out from the consumer side. And so I could definitely understand that there is probably a sentiment within Microsoft that they need to hold on to that, at least for now, until this AI stuff settles to some, in whatever way it falls. Because right now they are in a weird place. To the extent of where there is a, and I'm sure this is small relative to the total number of people using Windows for sure, but there is a much, much bigger push for people to move to Linux than I have ever seen in my entire life. And people legitimately doing it because they can do it and play games and do like basic OS stuff, unless you need to use very specific programs that run on Windows or potentially on Mac OS, like you could use Linux just fine. And it's only ever getting more and more accessible. And so I do think that Microsoft has to be pretty worried about like the way that this stuff is shifting. And so I have to imagine that they want to find some way for Xbox to be a successful brand and not to spin them off, at least for the foreseeable future.
I think everything you just said is correct and rational. It assumes that these people are rational actors living in an information feed that reflects reality. And I think it is very, very possible that at the upper echelons of Microsoft, that is not the case. And that they are not living in a world where they are getting like accurate reflections of the world back onto them. Otherwise, they would be downplaying the Copilot shit, right? Like, otherwise they would be making other strategic shifts. Yeah, I'll say like what I use Microsoft for is I do everything on Mac, on Apple devices. I do use Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Outlook, Excel every single day. being on Mac and I have the dedicated like desktop launchers,
Yes.
I'm pretty insulated from like Microsoft's worst decisions because a lot of their stupid shit they do on Windows doesn't come to the Mac clients, and I don't use their web apps. So I'm fine. I use those apps. They're good apps. I enjoy them, and I use them a lot. But like, again, I'm pretty insulated from that over here in Apple land, which is also getting a lot of business from people being mad at Microsoft, right? As we've seen. So like, yeah, it's a weird case. And I agree that like, if you're a rational actor and you know that everything else is your consumer facing products are under a lot of controversy and scorn, Xbox shouldn't be that hard to make look good, right? Like, especially if you maybe have a new device coming out, whatever shape that looks, but especially if you could make a device that like really appeals to kind of your core audience who that can then evangelize and talk nice about it. That would be a good step forward if you can publish games that people enjoy. But I do not buy into an assumption that these people are rational actors working in the reality you and I inhabit. And I think if you are living in the reality where winning the AI race, whatever the hell that means, is all that matters, then either you can turn Xbox into a Copilot box or you don't need it. And like, I'm really wondering what is actually going on within the minds of the people who have the ability to move things within Microsoft, because that just feels like a big black box right now that I do not understand.
Yeah, for sure. I think the most you can hope is that Satya Nadella, that the Eye of Sauron turns somewhere else, and he just kind of lets Xbox red itself for a while, and his focus is on somewhere else. Because I think if he is trying to micromanage Xbox to any extent, I think they are in trouble. I think they're in fucking trouble.
And that's the thing, like, man, if I was Asha Sharma, and I don't know anything about her, I don't know how much she knows about the business, but like, if I'm Asha Sharma, I'd be coming in and just kind of like, I would be focusing on getting good games out, getting them out on PlayStation and PC so you can pull in that money. I'd probably think about shuttering Game Pass or like sundowning it as a service. Like, certainly Call of Duty needs to be off of Game Pass. That is hurting that franchise. There are other things hurting that franchise. You probably need to start figuring out how you can retrain your core audience to buy games again, because of how disastrous that has been for your bottom line. And then, like, you know, whatever the next Xbox console thing is far enough in development that, like, short of scrapping it, there's not all that much the new team can do to, like, reframe it. But I think, you know, then you deal with like Ramageddon and everything going on, and like, what the hell do you do with that? So like, I don't know. I feel like the point of least resistance would just be like, focus on the game publishing arm and do as good a job like steering that ship. And like, that is one thing, is that like, that arm of Xbox has gotten into much, much better shape in recent years. You have had Xbox Game Studios being able to like ship things more, other than Halo, it's dead over there in the corner. Other studios have been like shipping a lot, have been getting a lot of good stuff out like that. And like, the multi-platform initiative is going pretty well in terms of getting stuff out on PlayStation and PC, and all of that's going, and like Steam, that partnership's going well. So like, I feel like that would be the path of least resistance, to just like make money and keep the ship running. And then everything else is a giant question mark, right?
Yes, yeah. I'm curious if their kind of hardware plans shift at all for this, especially when you don't have Phil Spencer there. Like, I feel like I have to imagine there is much less of a concern about the quote unquote legacy of Xbox and like maintaining the backwards compatibility and all that kind of, like, maybe that will still all happen if it was still, you know, under development and they have most of that stuff done, because that's all the insider rumors around whatever the next device is that it would be a PC style box with a more console friendly interface, but that would also be able to play Xbox One, like all existing backwards compatible games would still work on that device. But I have to wonder, if you're an Asha Sharma and you're looking at that kind of stuff, if you go, if there's like a big cost associated with doing all of that, if you're like, fucking cut that shit out. Like, it's like, we got to make a break. They're not a console company anymore. They are a PC company that also publishes every fucking Western video game, and that's it. And I wonder if this total break on the executive level will help Microsoft and Xbox make that total break for their products, because I kind of think it needs to happen. Like, as much as it would be great to maintain the backwards compatibility and all that shit, at some point you can't be two devices at the same time. You can't be a console and a PC. If you're just saying we're a PC that, and check this shit, you could plug that PC into your TV and it's very easy to use. It's like that's a pitch. That's what Valve is saying. You don't need to do that. And technically, if you're an Xbox gamer, you can also do the. But it's like, no, fuck that. Fuck that. Just, it's a PC thing. It can play all these PC games. It can run the Windows Game Store. It can also run fucking Steam and the Epic Game Store and all this other shit. And look how nice our user interface is, assuming they can make one, which I don't think they will. But that's the thing that they need to do. If they can do that, I think there is a potential, not mass scale product, but there is a product that people are interested in there. I think we're trying to make it an Xbox and this PC thing at the same time. I'm more skeptical about the idea of that kind of product. And so I wonder if this shift will also indicate that for their hardware in the future.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of my worries about Phil Spencer leaving, is that Phil Spencer, for all the things that went wrong under his tenure, he is the kind of guy who knew the industry and the player base well enough that if you gave him the spreadsheet that shows, not many players actually care about backwards compatibility or something that, you've seen a lot of in this industry, I think Spencer could look at that and go, but the numbers aren't everything. I know that our core base cares about this and that it is a worthwhile investment to keep brand loyalty and because it will interest people and blah, blah, blah. And I think that's an absolutely correct calculation for that kind of thing. If you have someone coming in who doesn't have a games background, they're not going to be making that calculation. And so that's kind of stuff I actually would feel like that would be a real loss from an Xbox identity would be some of that legacy stuff being able to carry forward that does keep people interested in that platform. But who knows? It's going to happen. I'm also really curious. Do you think Game Pass survives long term, or do you think that's a thing that they just need to cut loose?
I think they will continue to degrade that service. I think that maybe eventually they'll just get rid of it entirely. I kind of think it will take a long time for them to do that, but yeah. I think they will continue on the path they have already been on, which is to continue to make it more expensive and to continue to remove things from it, because and to create to continue to make additional tiers. I'm sure that they are going to collapse the PC Game Pass and console Game Pass. That distinction is going to go away. I bet that they will take Call of Duty all the way out of it. They moved it up to a higher tier in their most recent rounds of making it more expensive. But I think Sony can have their PlayStation Plus, Nintendo can have their Nintendo games for Nintendo Online, Microsoft can have Game Pass. It just can't be the thing it's been. And they've already obviously realized that because they have already been moving it far away from that direction. I think eventually the last thing will be completely removing the promise of the day one games for Xbox Game Studios and having that no longer be a guarantee, and have it just to be more like what Sony does, which is the Sony games will eventually come to PS Plus. It's just going to take a couple of years. And if you are someone who really wants to play those games day one, just go ahead and buy them. That's not really, this service is not for people who want to play the newest games the minute they come out. This is for people who want to play older games and just want a subscription to that and not have to buy a bunch of individual games. And they're just very different audiences, I think.
All right. Anything else before we move on?
No, I'm just very curious to see, what will happen with Xbox. Phil Spencer's regime has been in charge for 10 years at this point. It's been a long time for Xbox to have such a big shift like this, so it'll be very fascinating, both for the world of video games and the world of technology at large, how that all lands.
It came up in my feed again the other day, the video from E3 2013 where Sony. This was wasn't Yoshida on this one where they
it was the
Yoshida
and Adam Boyes
how to share games on PS5. Step 1, share your game, hand it over, and then thank you, and then it's a 20-second video, and man, it's just a reminder of Phil Spencer made a lot of mistakes. I also think it's possible that when the history is written, Xbox died at E3 2013, and it just was a long time in hospice care, trying to revive it.
It is probably the most brutal public-facing move any company made in this industry. It's just that one fucking little video. I mean, just Jesus Christ, what a fucked up thing to do, but a kind of amazing thing to do as a company.
I mean, honestly, what happened at that E3 has determined so much of video game history since then.
Yes.
It's insane.
Yeah,
Absolutely insane.
It's nuts.
All right, the next section I've labeled the less depressing video game news, and this is mostly release announcements. So one thing I just wanted to highlight, because I saw this announcement and I got super psyched, because I wanted to play some of these games again on recent consoles. Konami just announced, we're talking positively about Konami these days. You know, what the hell happened there? That's nice. Yep. They've announced the Marvel Maximum Collection, capital X, for PS5, Xbox, and Switch, which is a bunch of classic Marvel games, including some ones I've really wanted on modern consoles for a while. It looks like another excellent retro collection, very much in the vein of like their Castlevania collections. The big one is it's got X-Men the arcade game. That is the one that starts with X-Men Welcome to Die and has amazing music. And it's just, that game rocks, and it hasn't had like a recent port, but that game's awesome. Captain America and the Avengers, which will have its arcade, Sega Genesis, and NES versions. Spider-Man Venom Maximum Carnage, that's a really fun Super Nintendo beat-em-up. It'll also have its Genesis version. Venom Spider-Man Separation Anxiety, I haven't played that one, but I think it's in the same vein. Also,
it's basically a sequel to Maximum Carnage.
That'll also have the Super NES and Genesis versions. And then Spider-Man X-Men Arcade's Revenge for the Super Nintendo, Genesis, Game Boy, and Game Gear. And just as a cherry on top, because this one will be fun to take the historical look at, if nothing else, Silver Surfer for the NES, which has a very memorable Angry Video Game Nerd episode, because it's infamously like one of the most brutally hard games ever made. And it's the kind of game I assumed would never get any kind of like modern release, because there's a lot of like bad, NES Famicom games that are licensed that you're never going to see again. So I kind of think it's fun that'll be in there. And I was like, hey, this is a thing in video games I'm excited for. Little announcement, but I wanted to throw it on here to make us happy.
Yes, I played a lot of Maximum Carnage back in the day on the Genesis, which it was one of those games that I never owned, but I just would rent all the fucking time when I was a little kid. It is just like whenever we'd go and I did good on my homework or whatever, my parents would be like, oh, you can rent a game. And they're like, yes. And then it's like, and I want to get Maximum Carnage, but we could just never find an actual proper copy of it. So I just always just rented it. Yeah.
So this is kind of a weird collection. It's kind of basically brawlers, I guess you would say, broadly, other than Silver Surfer, which is a different thing. We don't have a collection right now with the Genesis X-Men games, though, right? Like Clone Wars?
No, we don't have X-Men 2 Clone Wars, which is a fucking sick game.
That's one I wish, maybe they're waiting to do a separate collection with because that is a slightly different kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, anyway, if you've never played X-Men the arcade game, that one is very fun and has amazing music and stuff. And has like the art from like the animated series, and it's good. So.
Yeah, if they ever do put out a collection that has X-Men 2 The Clone Wars in it, I will buy that immediately. That game just does like one of the most fucking crazy things any game from that generation ever did, which you turn it on and the game just starts. There's no start screen, there's no fucking logo. It's just you're a random X-Man standing in a fucking snowy field with robots shooting at you, and you play through the whole first level. And then you get the opening theme, and then you can pick your X-Men. If you want to like play the first level as a specific character, you just have to keep resetting the fucking console until you randomly get Nightcrawler or whoever. It's so fucking crazy. I love that game.
I'm genuinely curious how they would present that game in like this kind of like modern multi-game launcher, because that opening is so weird. And I feel like they could probably do it of like have a mode that really does like emulate the Genesis experience, or a mode where they're able to like give you the choice if you want it. But like, yeah, I that game rocks. I would like to see it again.
Yeah. I just wanted to be, you scroll to X-Men 2 The Clone Wars on the like carousel or whatever that you pick all the games, and you press X, and then it fades out and it just fades in. And there's no like, what options do you want? This is like that fucking menu that's like the menu these all add of like save states and all that. You can't get to that until you play the first level. And and the logo comes up, and then now it actually goes to like the fucking emulator front end where you can do all the regular options. That's what it should do, but only for that game.
No. I think that should be in a collection with a bunch of other games, but to get to any of the games, you have to play the first level of Clone Wars.
That would be amazing. I would love it. It would drive every other human being insane, and I'd just be like, this is the greatest collection of video games ever devised.
Well, anyway, this one, the Marvel Maximum Collection, is coming later in 2026, although they haven't given it a date. Speaking of Marvel games, this is going to be a big fucking year for Marvel games because we've got Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls coming on August 6th, and we just got confirmation that Marvel's Wolverine, the Insomniac game for PS5, is confirmed for September 15th, which is awesome. Remarkably, given our earlier discussion about Sony's, maybe anemic first-party output, Wolverine will be Insomniac's fourth full retail title launched during the PS5 generation after Spider-Man Miles Morales, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, and Spider-Man 2. Even if you want to be more strict and not accept Miles Morales, which I think you should, that's still 3, which is a lot. Like, if you put aside San Diego Studio and their annual MLB games, this is not only the most of any PlayStation studio this generation, it's more than any PlayStation first party put out in the PS4 generation either. You have to go back to the PS3 where you had Naughty Dog with Uncharted 1, 2, 3, and Last of Us to see a similar output. And given that the leaks have indicated they're aiming Spider-Man 3 for 2028, and possible reporting that the PS6 could get delayed in 2029, there's also the very hilarious possibility that they go 5 full games for the PS5 in this generation's time span. What is Insomniac on, and how do I get some of it? Because they're on a fucking roll.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Clearly they've got like 2 eternal teams that are rotating on these projects, and there's just like an efficiency where, again, I think Miles Morales is a little bit more complicated because it's this smaller project in there. But generally speaking, if you're looking at like there's a 5-year gap between Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2, there's a 5-year gap between Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart and Marvel's Wolverine. Like, I think I think there's just like a clear efficiency in the studio of like the budget, the expectation, the number of people, who's working on what. And it's pretty nuts because it's not just that like the number of games they're releasing, but it's that like kind of the regularity with clearly the production is working. Because I saw a pretty interesting interview with, or read it with, I think it's the head of Obsidian, because last year Obsidian did something crazy where they released 3 different video games. They had Avowed, they had The Outer Worlds 2, and they had Grounded 2. All 3 of those games came out in 2025, which was a thing where like, how the fuck does one studio put out 3 games? But the interview with the head of Obsidian was talking about how that is actually like an indicator of the production having gone wrong for multiple of those projects, and that in reality it's you don't want this. You don't want to release 3 games in the same year. And I thought it was like an interesting, it was like Obsidian is obviously very efficient as well, but they also like had certain struggles with their development that caused these things to all line up on top of each other, which is not what you want for a studio, because now you've got multiple teams needing to start up a new project at the same time, and that's not the best scenario to be in. And so it just really highlights the efficiency of Insomniac, and how well honed the studio is. And it's just one of the only studios in the West that does this, right? This is something that, again, like we see Nintendo do this kind of stuff. We see Capcom do this kind of stuff. Sega be able to do this kind of stuff with some of their studios. And there's like an efficiency and a regularity of the output. Not so for most studios over here. So it is pretty nuts what Insomniac has managed to do.
And, the pushback I imagine some people would give, because I've seen people give this, is like, yeah, but Spider-Man Miles Morales and Spider-Man 2 reused the New York map and a lot of the combat, so it's not a new game. Shut up.
Yes, that's part of the point. Like,
that's
guess
part of the
what?
point, yes.
Resident Evil 9 obviously reuses and like, builds off of the base of Resident Evil 4 Remake and Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil Village and Resident Evil 7. And it's like, that's good.
Yes.
It's good
that's
that
game
like,
development.
every once in a while there's a reused animation. Every once in a while there's like a reused enemy like model or whatever. Like, that's fucking good. Like, they're smart about how they're making their video games. It's like that it used to be totally normal. This like there's countless, piles of reused shit between Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 on the original PlayStation.
Yes.
They put out those games like fucking 8 months to a year apart from each other. It's like it used to be totally normal and accepted that you didn't totally reinvent the entire video game every time you made another video game. And at some point people just lost their minds around this shit. But yes, like,
accepted and also healthy. It means that like, because also Insomniac is known that they have a much more healthy studio culture than other teams within Sony who shall go unnamed, right? Like, they do not have all of these scandals that we hear about with Crunch and stuff. I'm sure it's not perfect. No one's perfect. But like, yeah, to me, this is smart. It's like, just, yes, if you're making a Spider-Man game and you're going to make a sequel, you don't need to have him like go to Paris so that you can make a whole Paris map and have your team crunch every Sunday for the next 2 years so you can finish the Paris map so Spidey can swing around the Eiffel Tower. No, that's not what people are actually coming to your game for. It's smart to be able to like reuse and innovate and iterate on things as you go along, and that's fine and that's good. And that's the other thing, is that that's not the only thing they've done. In this, they've also had Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, which is my favorite game actually of this generation for them so far. Great stuff there. And then Wolverine will also be a new kind of thing. So like that balance between iteration and innovation, I think they're very good at finding that. And yeah, Sony is very lucky that they got Insomniac when they did, is what I'll say there.
Yeah, and I'm going to just assume that Wolverine is not going to be some like 40 to 50 hour monster game,
right,
that has us like crazy. I mean, maybe it is, who knows? We haven't seen that much of it, but I'm guessing, 12 hours, maybe 20 at the max if there's like a lot of side content or something in it. But also that's like about the playtime of Spider-Man or Spider-Man 2 is like 20-ish hours. But
very replayable. Again, like going back to their like Ratchet and Clank, Spyro the Dragon roots, the idea is that these games are replayable and have rewards for like going back through them multiple times, and I love that kind of thing. So
yes, and it's just nice to not have to have every video game take you 100 hours to play through. It's the big huge kudos to Insomniac. I'm very excited for that Wolverine game.
Yeah, they've become a studio that I'm like, if they're putting something out, I'm interested in it, because they've been very reliable for years now. So that's awesome. All right. Pokemon hosted a Pokemon Presents showcase for the 30th anniversary on February 27th, where most of it was just like showing off things we kind of already knew about, but they did unveil, as expected, Generation 10 Pokemon Waves and Winds. This confirmed a lot of stuff from the Giga Leak a couple of, like it was either last year or the year before, including that this is very apparently running on a brand new, much improved engine. This is a Pokemon game that actually looks like it is designed for a home console, not like a handheld. Like all of the Switch era Pokemon games very much continued the visual design of the 3DS era, which is part of why I think they've had issues. And better still, Waves and Winds is not a 2026 release, which I think is what a lot of people were expecting. It is planned for 2027. Pokemon always releases in the fall, so expected like this is actually close to 2 years away, but that appears to also definitively end the Switch 1 era's annual release strategy, where over the Switch 1's lifespan, a mainline Pokemon had a major release every single year, whether that be a brand new game, a remake, or a major DLC. It seems like we're moving away from that. The fact that Legends ZA got pushed from 24 to 25 for the Switch 2 already started changing that. But yeah, there is Pokemon Pokopia coming out, but there have always been spin-offs. I'm talking about like the mainline, you're catching, you're battling, your story, all that stuff. It seems like we're moving past that, which is healthy and good for Game Freak to do. And this trailer looked lovely. It looks like a nice, like new, open world Pokemon game that looks like it'll actually feel at home on your television, which I'm happy for, because I think Legends ZA took a lot of steps in the right direction, but this is the clean generational break we've probably needed.
Yes, I watched the trailer and my eyes didn't bleed afterwards, which is a huge improvement because, man, the last few... I mean, that was, Pokemon Z and A looked totally fine. Maybe the buildings are a little crunchy looking PS2, but whatever. Like, it was not like, oh god, it hurts to look at this game, which was true of Pokemon Legends Arceus and, Sword and Shield? Or Scarlet Violet, that's it. Yeah. It's not like you're not going to look at it, it's not like the most graphically amazing game ever. It kind of looks like probably what the Switch 1 game should have looked like, but with better image quality because it's on the Switch 2. Like, it feels like if you went to an alternate universe and they had done like a really great job of making a Switch 1 Pokemon game, and this was the Switch 2 version of it, that's kind of what I think the trailer looks like visually. But that's fine, it doesn't need to be the most insane looking game in the world. The water tech looks quite nice, which is good. I'm very excited to get another game where the only thing that Pokemon fans do with it is complain about all the water, which feels like that's like every other Pokemon game. Just people are like, oh, there's so much fucking water in this game. Why are all the water Pokemon here? What is that, 3? Was that Gen 3 is the one that people...
Hoenn is the one that like started that, yeah. And generally, I don't think it's ever really been a problem. I don't know what people are getting on about, but yeah. No, I think, Game Freak clearly got caught off guard by like the existence of the Nintendo Switch. Like, and I don't mean like they were like surprised by it, but like they had continued, and this has always been the way Game Freak has done things, is that they do not immediately start developing for the new hardware. Like, they were making, Gold and Silver are Game Boy Color games that came out, and actually they were backwards, you could play them on the original Game Boy too. The GBA was out when Gold and Silver were coming out, right? So like this was not, they were not like trying to like be there day one on the GBA. When the Nintendo DS came out, they were still like Fire Red and Leaf Green were out. The Black and White came out months before the 3DS, and then it was a couple years before the 3DS had X and Y. And I think and when you look at the release strategy, Sun and Moon were pretty close to the Switch 1's release, and when the Switch 1 came out, they had Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon out for the 3DS that year. And so I think they were expecting to like wait longer to like really embrace the Switch. And I also think they maybe were maybe thinking of the Switch more as a portable first device, or maybe thinking that like Nintendo, it might not work, or whatever is the case. They clearly were making games for the Switch 1 that were much more like extensions of their 3DS stuff. And like they never took the time to like take a step back and get their tech figured out. And on top of that, then they started doing the annual release thing. And it was just kind of a perfect storm of problems that obscured that. I think on a game design level, a lot of their Switch 1 stuff is really good. A lot of it is very adventurous and new for the series. The writing has kind of never been better for Pokemon as it's been in recent years. The music has been amazing. There's been all these other things. So if nothing else, I'm happy that maybe they get some of this other shit sorted out. And then the other stuff they've been doing well can shine through, and we can have a healthy conversation around Pokemon, as impossible as that sounds.
Yes. Oh, yeah, because I mean, obviously the other problem with the Switch that they encountered is that it broke the line of continuity within the backwards compatible tradition, yes. Right? Because you could play Gold and Silver on your Game Boy Advance. You could play, your Nintendo DS Pokemon games on your Nintendo 3DS, but you can't just put a 3DS cartridge into a Switch and be good to go. And so, yeah, it definitely felt like it was a very awkward transition for them. This game seems cool. They did show the three new starters, and as is typical, there's only one good one, which is the Fire Dog.
Fuck you. The
Pumpkin in Japanese. I've watched the trailer in Japanese, so I actually don't know what the English names are. To realize he's Pumpkin in Japanese, which is cool.
Okay, I agree that Pumpkin, or it's Pombon in English, and Pombon is adorable, but I will go to the mat for Brout, the new grass owl who looks like an angry bird. I like Brout. I like Brout a lot. I am a dog person.
You already explained why Brout's not good when you use the phrase grass angry bird.
I think he looks cool. I think he's got attitude, and I think Gek was a cute little lizard guy. So you know what? I'm good. I like all of these.
I'll just say I watched a supercut of reactions of various HoloLive VTube streamers to the trailer, and to a one, every single one was like, "Oh my god, look at Pumpkin!" Like, holy shit! And actually, hilariously, the one who had the most muted reaction was Kodane, who is herself a dog, and I thought that was very funny. That the dog girl was the one that's like, "Oh, they're nice," but she's not that into Pokemon. But everyone's just like, they saw the dog. It's like, the dog's fucking great, and there are two other ones there. They're fine. I'm not saying they're bad, but But I question the person who, on the first time playing this game, and they are given these three choices, picks anything other than the Fire Dog. What are you even doing?
Okay, I'm gonna pick Brout. It's 2 years away, but I'm into it now. That's what I'm doing, just to spite you, Sean.
Okay, I mean, if you want to rob yourself of the proper experience of playing this game, you can go ahead, but that's your prerogative.
All right, and finally, we haven't talked about this much yet, but there's going to be a God of War show on Amazon. It's a TV show. It's based on the Norse games, so I'm not sure how they're going to fill people in who aren't video gamers on what the fuck Kratos is. It's this Greek god living in Norse mythology times. Okay, ignoring that, we did get our first image as production begins with Ryan Hurst playing Kratos in full makeup and cosplay, and I cannot stop laughing at this image. He's like slightly hunched over. He's like looking, he kind of has like a Pennywise from It energy to me a little bit in like the makeup and everything. Also, Ryan Hurst, he's kind of a big dude, but he's just a normally proportioned man. I'm getting very, like, in the Full Metal Alchemist live action movies, the part with Armstrong in there where like he's trying to do all the anime Armstrong things, but he's just a dude, not a big buff anime dude. And I just, you know what, keep making these dumb live action video game adaptations, guys. They at least give me a good laugh.
Yeah, it definitely it is very reminiscent of your like Japanese live action adaptation of an anime where like it's just overly faithful to the costume and design from the original thing. It's one fucking production still. Who knows? The show could be very good, but it is definitely an incredibly goofy looking thing that probably is not the first image from the production I would have put out were it me.
Even if it is good though, like it's another one where I just go, what the hell is that? If this is just a faithful adaptation of God of War 2018, look, God of War 2018 is more cinematically advanced than anything you're going to be able to do on this game because of the oneer strategy it does, which you're not going to be able to replicate in this show. So I'm kind of like, okay, I really do not get it, but I think the idea of a God of War live action show is one of the most crazy things I've ever heard, because God of War, like, even in its more sober form in like the 2018 reboot, is a cartoony ass thing. Like, I do not think it makes sense in live action. And it doesn't have the benefit of being like One Piece or something where you could lean into the cartoony fun of it, because it is dour and heavy and serious, and we'll see.
Yeah. I don't really have an opinion on the idea of making a live action God of War. They can do what they want. That's fine.
Will it have flashbacks? Will it be like Lost and it'll have a flashback structure and each episode is about Kratos killing a different Greek god as he's like raising Atreus in the present and like having crazy sex scenes? That would be fun. That could be a way you could do it.
Yes, I think I assume they will at least have like the flashback episode where it's like, they show some interpretation of the like, he had an old family and he was tricked by Ares and then the ash on his skin and all that kind of stuff. I assume that they will do that. It'll be like episode 6 or something of the show.
I just love imagining like, so like the Last of Us TV show, my mom got really into that and really enjoyed that show. And that was kind of funny because she's just never plays or touches video games at all, but she enjoyed that. But like Last of Us is something you can very easily do that with because as a story, it doesn't have any like gamer buy-in that you need to get into it that you have to adapt to the show. God of War, I think it's easy for us as like people who know and play video games to forget what a weird fucking idea God of War 2018 is, of taking your Greek god dude and putting him in Norse mythology now, and like we can get that because like even if you haven't played the original God of War games, like what they were and that kind of stuff. But like I'm trying to imagine my mom watching God of War and being like, he's great, but what is this? I think that I enjoy imagining that because it's fun.
I think that part is not that hard to sell. It's very like, I don't know, 2010-ish to me. But there's we have lots of stories about like mixed mythologies. Yeah, this is like American Gods by Neil Gaiman, as little as I am to invoke his name.
Yeah.
But, like there's just like, there was a trend in a lot of YA literature of doing this kind of like, we mix different mythologies and have characters like intersect each other kind of thing. So I think you could pitch that and have that make sense. For me, it is more the like, how do you break up the narrative into distinct episodes? Like, so much of it is the like in the game is your quest to go up the mountain and all that. Like, I just like think like making it into a TV show, I think you're going to really struggle with the pacing of how do you put that together. So I do not think it's an easy adaptation to go about. I'm curious to see what they do though.
Again, I think every episode has a softcore sex scene with a various Greek goddess, and you do it as a flashback, and then it comes back, and he's sitting around the campfire with his son, who's like, "Dad, what are you thinking about?" And he goes, "Don't. You don't need to know. You'll know when you're older."
Well, I just need it to, at the beginning of an episode, you just have like moan sounds in the background and then a Grecian urn that is rocking back and forth, and then big icons pop up on the screen. You have to press the arrows on your remote at the right time. Like, I want them to just put the sex minigame in the fucking show. Netflix did its whole, like, we've got interactive whatever, I think they've scuttled all that shit. But if Netflix could do it, Amazon could do it. Come on.
Yeah. Actually, question, have you used Amazon Prime lately? That is the most broken-ass video platform. Oh, my God.
It's a fair point. They've got all the money in the world. They can figure it out. They make a bespoke thing that asks you to press the buttons on your remote so that Kratos can fuck.
All right, let's do some anime news. This is fun, Sean.
Yeah.
So, Ufotable, our dear close personal friends at Ufotable, have released a 30-second teaser for their long-awaited Witch on the Holy Night movie, which we knew they'd been working on forever, but clearly had gotten delayed in the midst of all their furious Kimetsu no Yaiba work. But they confirmed that is now planned to release this year in 2026. This was an actual teaser of footage from the film. I think we'd had teasers before that were more like art that evoked the game. This is actual scenes. It looked very good. And this will be their first non-Kimetsu no Yaiba release since Fate's Day Night Heaven's Feel 3 in 2020. So it's been a while since they've put out anything not Demon Slayer. And hey, their Type Moon stuff is secretly, as much as I love Kimetsu, is kind of their best stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'm super, super, super stoked for Witch on the Holy Night, the movie.
Yes, I'm very happy they finally showed more of it, because this is just production has felt like it's been in the background for fucking ever. It's just it's a little hint of where they're going in their post Kimetsu world, which they'll come to, sooner than later. It does also then bring to mind their also similarly long promised and not yet seen Genshin Impact thing, where there was that announcement back when you were still fucking playing Genshin Impact. That's how long ago that was. I'm very curious if that ever actually comes to fruition. Because it has always in my mind been I wonder if they'll ever do that Genshin Impact. And then my mind immediately goes, they haven't even fucking done the Witch on the Holy Night movie. They're not getting to Genshin Impact yet.
I also it's they are now making the most successful anime in history. Not just that, the most successful movies in their country's history. Some of the most successful movies of all time. They are legitimately at a point where they are probably the only anime studio who could say Genshin needs them more than they need Genshin, which is a crazy thing to say. But if it's not floating their boat, they don't have to do it. Witch on the Holy Night is a thing you do because you for the love of the game, right? And I'm glad they're doing that. Do you think that Witch on the Holy Night gets some kind of big international release so that they can do a from the makers of Demon Slayer Infinity Castle and try to get people into the theater? Because normally this would be your niche plays for one night kind of thing, because that's what the Fate's Day Night Heaven's Feel movies were over here. I would love it if Sony and Aniplex try to do a big release with a Demon Slayer kind of tie-in or something. That'd be hilarious.
Yeah, I think you could pitch it, Yeah. I mean, it's a standalone story. It doesn't have the problem of the Heaven's Feel movies.
Right.
Those are very hard movies to pitch to someone to go see, because you have to kind of explain there's a TV show you gotta watch, but you also kind of have to understand that TV show is an adaptation of the middle arc of a 3-arc video game. And technically, the first arc of that game was sort of adapted into an anime, but that was by a different studio. Oh, but there was the prequel, and that has some similar thematic elements from that first arc. So you couldn't just watch the prequel and then watch the adaptation of this middle arc of the game, and then you can watch this trilogy of movies. And that's a lot of information to put in a trailer to tell people what this movie is. Witch on the Holy Night, I think you could obviously not do an incredibly massive wide release on the scale of what they're looking for these Kimetsu no Yaiba movies, but I hope that they try doing something that's more than just a Thursday night at a couple of theaters. It would be nice to see something that is not just your huge properties like a Jujutsu Kaisen, or Chainsaw Man, and Kimetsu see the benefit of this and get a little bit more and see how well does a project like that do. Because I think you could, if you get some good trailers, and I think you could pitch it to a big enough audience that you could make a lot more money than just the little tiny limited releases these movies historically got.
Yeah, I mean, I would at least like to see Witch on the Holy Night get give it the scale of release you'd give a Mamoru Hosoda movie or a Makoto Shinkai movie in America. Because I actually think there's no reason you couldn't sell it that same way. It's an original story. You get to say, people do know who Ufotable is enough at least to get some butts in seats. I would like to see that. It'd be cool. And Sony, because this is all, again, it's Aniplex. It goes through Sony. They have a big release arm now here with anime movies. I say try it. All right, bigger news. At the Evangelion 30th anniversary of Evangelion Festival. Sorry. I just loved having to say that sentence. Yeah. At that festival, at the Yokohama Arena this week, they announced a new Neon Genesis Evangelion TV series. The madman / creator behind Nier Automata, Yoko Taro, is serving as the series composer, so the head writer. Kazuya Tsurumaki is directing. Tsurumaki, of course, is someone who obviously started his career way back when at Gainax as an animator on original EVA, and then he has worked on every version of this ever since. So he would be the obvious natural successor.
Yeah. And he just finished directing G-Quax as well.
Yes.
It's like the thing people would know him from right now.
Yes. And then Toko Yatabe is serving as assistant director. He's someone who's also worked at Kara. He worked on the last EVA movie. He was a storyboarder and episode director on Chainsaw Man over with Mappa. And then Keiichi Okabe, who is the composer of Nier Automata, will compose the music. And this is being produced by Studio Kara in conjunction with Cloverworks, who obviously do really good work. So that is a cool partnership. But man, like, I think this was, I remember you and I having this conversation with the fourth rebuild of EVA movie, and thinking like, okay, now that Hideaki Anno has clearly like ended his version of EVA, do they do more with this property? And I can't imagine a more exciting way to do more with this property than having fucking Yoko Taro write it. And of course, Kazuya Tsurumaki, absolute right director. I'm very excited to see what the hell this is.
Yeah, I'm curious what the fuck it is. Like it's just such an insane announcement. Like one thing just to point out, because it's just a detail that is fucking hilarious. I mean, it makes sense if you played the games, but just the notion of like the writer and the music composer for the series, or that's the pair, like we've talked about before on the podcast, that it's not uncommon to have director-composer pairs, and that like this director often works with the same composer and stuff. I've never really thought of, but this screenwriter and a composer, they are always working together. But obviously there's just a close working relationship from the games that Yoko Taro directed. But it's just such a weird thing, is like from the writer and composer of a thing, it's like an interesting duo to keep paired on another project. But I mean, there's obviously a very clear intent there of getting both of them together. For me, the huge question is, what is the nature of this project? Like, is it going to use the characters of Neon Genesis Evangelion? Like it's one of the things that's very interesting, because this property has always been so deeply attached to Shinji, Rei, and Asuka in particular. Like those three characters, it's like all the marketing, it's like the thing that they made, here's my Rei deodorant, it's like the merchandising, it's so intimately tied into particularly Asuka and Rei, but I put Shinji there certainly as well, and Katsuragi, is up there. It's just a franchise that's really, really, really closely tied to these very specific characters that have become hugely iconic, and are big, big money makers. But also I don't know, like, and I don't feel like Yoko Taro would be someone who'd be interested in, and I want to tell like a different kind of reboot of Evangelion that uses the characters and goes in a different direction. Maybe he would, I don't know. But like there's obviously that one option, which is in some way attaching this directly to the characters and story of Neon Genesis Evangelion and doing something new with it. Or the alternative is you do your AU EVA show. In the way with Gundam, you can do your Mobile Fighter G Gundam, Gundam Wing, After War Gundam X, whatever, Gundam Seed, all that kind of lineage of unique independent shows that totally stand on their own, but take certain themes and iconography from this kind of parent story of the OG Gundam. And if that's the direction they go with it, which would be interesting, because media properties don't do that these days. Media properties are all about, let's mine all the nostalgia possible. Let's have some young whippersnapper go and he meets Shinji and gets in the Ava or whatever, and you have your legacy IP sequel. But that's just not a thing that Yoko Taro's name jumps out to me as like he would want to be on that kind of project. So I'm just like really, really curious what form this is going to take, what kind of story they're going to tell. They released a very brief teaser that's basically just a panning shot over a background, but it's like a pile of instruments in kind of like classroom desks, and that's kind of it, with like the names of all the people attached popping up as logos. So it's a wild announcement, not an announcement I was expecting to hear. And it was one of the things where, as when I read the story, I'm like, how much fucking news can they possibly can come out in a week that is something that we need to cover on our podcast? Because we've really narrowed over the years the kind of news topics we covered to only do the things that we're really interested in. And it was just like, you've got to be shitting me. Like, the Xbox, fucking Phil Spencer's out of there. They shut down fucking Bluepoint. And then we have a teaser for Witch on the Holy Night, and then now you're telling me that fucking Yoko Taro is making a Neon Genesis Evangelion TV show. Like, it's just, the universe works in mysterious ways sometimes.
I definitely hope what they're doing is like AU Evangelion.
Yes, that's what I want as well.
And you know, knowing that these are the biggest Gundam fans in the world over at Studio Kara, they are aware that that is an option, obviously. And I think that would be really cool. You know, EVA is an interesting property in that obviously it has this enormous cultural footprint, enormous influence, but it's a small thing. It's a 2-core TV show with a movie, and then it is 4 movies. It's a very small amount of media in terms of that core, like, and then there's a manga too. Like, but it's a very small amount of like main media.
Don't forget Neon Genesis Evangelion 2, the video game that came out on PlayStation 1, I think.
I did forget that one. I apologize to the fine developers of Neon Genesis Evangelion 2 for the PS1, we think. But yeah, like, it's a small amount of stuff, and I think all of that stuff is so tied into, obviously, Anno as the, like, auteur of the story, that I think if you're setting it free to do something else, EVA is more than rich enough as an aesthetic, as a like set of themes, as a style, that you can do the AU Evangelion kind of thing, and I would love to see what that would look like. I think, you know, the rebuild is so good, and that 4th movie in particular is such a perfect ending that, like, I don't think there's anything more you can even say about Shinji and these characters, because I think they put such a fine point on them. So I'd like to see something new.
Yeah, me too. I do have to say I was wrong. Neon Genesis Evangelion 2 came out for the PlayStation 2, not the PlayStation 1, and I apologize for spreading misinformation. Apparently, there was a PSP version that came out in 2006, which was not a thing I knew about.
Is that just a weird title, or is it actually attempting to be like a sequel to a story that cannot possibly have a sequel, given how it ends?
I think it's sort of like kind of has pseudo sequel like elements, but is also kind of retellings of elements of Evangelion. I have not played it, obviously, but there is a video game called Neon Genesis Evangelion 2, which is just a random fact. I like to mention it sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you know what? Maybe that'll be our topic another month as we go back and play Neon Genesis Evangelion 2. It has no English version, but you know, we can get around that.
Absolutely. I'm here. If we want to play Neon Genesis Evangelion 2, bring back the Let's Play series. And here we go.
All right. Well, that's our last laugh for a while, because our final piece of news this week is that... okay, I'm going to back up for a second before I say the news. This last week, I was in my office hours, and I had a former student who was interviewing me for a project for a new class they're in, where they had to, like, talk to someone about the media landscape and write a little article about it or something. So they were interviewing me, and of course, one of the things they asked about was the consolidation in the American media environment and the proposed merger of Netflix with Warner Brothers. Netflix, I say merger, but Netflix would be buying Warner Brothers because Warner Brothers is up for sale, and the possibility that Paramount is also bidding for it. We talked about it, and I gave the detailed explanation I've given, which is that all of this is bad, the consolidation is bad, but Netflix would, of the two, be the vastly preferable option for options, you know, for reasons A, B, C, D, which I've gone through before on the podcast. That student leaves my office, I go back, I'm checking my emails, I'm doing some more work, and then I get the push alert on my phone while I'm still in my office that Netflix has chosen to bow out of their proposed deal to buy Warner Brothers after Paramount raised their offer to $31 a share, around a $111 billion total acquisition. Netflix's bid was in the 80s, like the $80 billion range, and Netflix ultimately decided that they did not want to spend that much money on Warner Brothers, which was a good call on their part, because Netflix's stock has actually been in a free fall since this proposed acquisition, because shareholders were not happy about Netflix potentially taking on that much debt into what is otherwise like a stable, successful business that doesn't need it. And so their stock has actually risen dramatically since announcing they would not buy Warner Brothers. But this leaves Paramount as the only bidder to buy the company, the only one that could potentially do it for that amount of money, because, of course, Paramount, after their merger with Skydance last year, is now owned by the third richest man in the world, Larry Ellison, and his family. And now they will be buying storied Hollywood institution Warner Brothers. And I've been talking to a lot of people about this. Obviously, as a film professor, this is something people have been wanting my opinion on. And I guess I'm at a point where I don't know how to say it other than I think this is like apocalyptic news that is like the end of Hollywood as we know it. It's bad. It also means that the Ellisons will own CNN in addition to CBS, and they will probably be doing the Barry Weissification of that too. So it is just more media owned by this Trump-loving family of rich goons who now will own all of Paramount, all of CBS, all of Skydance, HBO, Warner Brothers, CNN, CBS News, and they own a controlling stake in TikTok as well. This feels dystopian. I don't like talking about it. You can hear it in my voice. I want out of the simulation, Sean. Everything has gone wrong. It's all bad. It's all bad. What the fuck?
This is why I thought you intentionally left this news piece off of the outline, because like, I think probably Jonathan is too raw. He just doesn't want to fucking talk about it because it's bad. Yes, it's like it is. I agree with you that kind of apocalyptic level of just both for like the movie industry, specifically for like the media industry as we've known it up till now. Obviously has had a lot of problems, and this is just feels like a kind of a death blow where we are moving to a sort of pseudo state-owned media where it's, you know, not directly the state itself, but it is these billionaires that are politically motivated and in cahoots with the president and his cronies because it makes them more and more and more money, and also because they're evil, racist, you know, sexual predators and all this kind of shit. It's really horrifying. It's that kind of news where, like, when you go for but what's the silver lining? It's the, like, it's getting so bad that, like, the wheel of fortune turns and eventually, you know, the fucking guillotine comes out. I don't know. Like, it's, you know, like, history has a long arc. The empires that once united separate, and once separated unite, and so has been since antiquity. And, you know, eventually the fucking eunuch's got to get fucking taken out. This is a Romance of the Three Kingdoms reference. And it's like that's where my mind goes. Is I think and I am hoping that we are building up to such an intense backlash, politically and amongst the people, that there will be action taken against this shit, and that is like the most you can hope for, that we can get to a place where this can all be broken up again, because our media and entertainment landscape can't exist in a world where one company owns almost all of it, and the rest of it is owned by like one or two other companies. That's just like it's not a feasible proposition. You know, it's not a market anymore. It's just this sort of, it's that cyberpunkian fucking mega corporations own everything and run your lives, and they own the media, and they own your entertainment, and they own kind of every piece that you touch in your life. And once you're in that position, you have no power, and action needs to be taken to right that scenario. And we are like, we're at that point, you know, we are properly there with this buyout.
Yeah. Okay. Let me try to tease some things out, because I don't want to be too. I think it's reasonable to be doomer about this, but I also want to be careful about what is and isn't like the worst case scenario here. Like, one thing I will push back slightly from my own reaction, from what I've seen from others, is the CNN of it all. The Ellisons, like, honestly, the thing the Ellisons own that worries me by far the most is TikTok. I worry about that way more than CBS or CNN. Because here's the thing. The only reason the Ellisons are doing what they're doing to CBS and now will be doing to CNN is because Donald Trump cares so fucking much about those things that it is the way they can curry favor with him so that they can have their media empires. What they actually want this for is to have the giant media conglomerate that makes them a lot of money. CBS News does not make money. CNN hemorrhages money. CNN is an awful business at this point that is just losing money hand over fist, has no ratings on cable. Like, if you look at CNN's cable ratings these days, it's abysmal what a hole they are in. And so, like, at the end of the day, I am enraged by the Barry Weissification of CBS News, and I think it is deleterious on an overall level that anyone like that has any level of power at all. But does it actually change the media ecosystem, information environment all that much? No, because most people who vote are not getting their news from fucking CBS News linear television, right? Just as, if CNN changes its ideological valence tomorrow, does that actually change the world all that much? Not as much as it would have, 20, 30 years ago. Most people are, and we still live in a country with a strong First Amendment. Obviously, our president is testing it every single day, but he's also losing those tests a lot of the time. And so, it is still, we are not, I've seen the comparison and I understand it because it is a similar playbook, but we are not Viktor Orban's Hungary yet, because we do have, for every, media ecosystem that the president gobbles up, there are several other independent ones that rise up because we still have those protections. So, that is one thing where, in the overall apocalyptic scenario of this, I think it is worth keeping all of that in mind. The thing about CNN and CBS News is that the human being who cares most about those organizations is Donald Trump. He is the one who is obsessed with cable news, not most Americans. And so this is to placate him. It's not really, I think, a strategy for anything else other than that, honestly. And it's pathetic, but that is kind of the scenario we are in. Also, this is not a done deal yet. Now, if Donald Trump has its way and is in power forever, it will be a done deal, but he will not be in power forever. In fact, at the end of this year, he's going to lose the House, and I think at this point, increasingly likely the Senate. Now, can they stop a merger on their own? No, but there's things the Democrats could do in that situation to at least have investigations and throw sand in the wheels. And it is possible this is going to be one of the most complex major mergers of all time. Even in Trump's America, it can't happen overnight. It is a lot of money. It is a lot of money. $110 billion, even for the Ellison family, is a crazy amount of money. And, if they don't have this thing done by the time 2028, 2029 rolls around, then you have a different administration in there. Even if they do get it done, it is possible that the Democrats will ride it. This is maybe wish casting, but it is possible that the Democrats ride into power in 2029 with some kind of antitrust wind at their sails, which would be awesome, which would be great if that was a mandate, if that was something that gets campaigned upon. And we've already seen some, Senator Ruben Gallego, who's actually been pretty good at reading where the winds are going on this stuff, saying day one we will break this up, which I don't know if they will or if they will be able to, but it would be nice for that to be the purpose in the future. So I just, put all those caveats on there. It is important to not be completely doomer and assume that this is a completely done deal yet. If and when it is, though, I think the real harms will be, one, there are going to be absolutely just horrific layoffs coming from this. Because the thing about the Netflix merger is Netflix probably wasn't going to have to right size all of that much after that, because there isn't a ton of overlap between Netflix and WB in terms of the literal things they do. Netflix does not own and operate a movie studio in Burbank. Paramount does. They don't need to. That is why we are going to have massive layoffs out of this that are going to make everything else, like the stuff you've seen in gaming, look, it's going to be like that. It's going to be crazy. I think, you'll have consolidation of streaming platforms and some of that stuff. I do worry about some of the more adventurous and interesting programming HBO makes, like John Oliver. Honestly, I'm going to be fascinated to see if Paramount lets him continue doing what he does, because nobody enjoys the taste of the hand that feeds more than John Oliver, and he's not going to suddenly shut up about that. So that'll be interesting. But also HBO makes a lot of really important documentaries and investigative stuff that does make a social impact. So I think there's questions around that. We'll see. I think one thing that is probably going to come from this is that Paramount does not currently have an active home media division. They have completely abandoned that. All of their home video, 4K, Blu-ray releases, anything catalog goes through a third party. I forget their name at this point, but that third party isn't even authorized to make new stuff. They just repackage existing stuff. So they aren't remastering new movie or making new remasters of old movies. It's stuff like Top Gun is getting another steelbook release of the existing 4K disc. So versus Warner Brothers has a really active physical media arm. They have the best physical media arm of any of the studios, including Warner Archive, which does amazing work. And I would expect all of that to get shut down. I would expect TCM to get shut down. I would expect more than anything, like as an academic, I think this is going to be an unbelievable blow to film history and the preservation of film history. And that is probably the thing that scares me most in terms of real world impacts from this, alongside all of the layoffs. And that's why I think like this just feels like a death knell for a certain version of Hollywood, because Warner Brothers is the oldest studio that has been continuously still in existence since its inception, and it will now effectively cease to exist, and that is a real bummer.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, as you say, I think, I think one thing that can come out of this is because it is so, I think it's so obviously over the line as far as these acquisitions and mergers have gone, and I do think we are at a point where it is becoming a substantial enough political pressure that it is a thing that people can move on. And I think that when we have this kind of new generation of Democrat, like Zoran Mamdani, who are moving on and using a lot of like very kind of like tangible affordability kind of elements for their politics, right? And they're taking this very kind of economics focused approach. And I think that there is such a clear pitch of the like one company can't own everything. That gives too much power to one company. And if we break this up, that creates all of these jobs. It creates competition. There's nothing an American loves more than competition in the quote unquote free market and all this kind of bullshit. And like, I think that and I'm hoping that we are moving to a place where this newer generation of Democrat has enough power and influence within the party, because those are the politicians that are going to be by far the most successful from an electoral point of view, that it can push out the fuckers, the old decrepit mummies at the top, and actually get a larger political momentum amongst a large number of leftist politicians. And that is the thing that I think you can move to, not just breaking this up, but breaking up other mergers that should have never gone through, and helping sort of move into a different era of business in America, where it is not just about one company gobbling up every single piece of competition in the world and making a massive mega corporation. And that's like my hope, is that this is like, it's getting so ridiculous. It's getting so insane, how large these mergers are becoming, that I think that just continues to fuel the fire for a much bigger backlash when we come around the other side. And as you say, like, these mergers take a long, long time. The bigger they are, the longer it takes for them to work through. And hopefully, we can be in a scenario where it can be disrupted and broken up before these negative impacts like see their way through, and kind of prevent some of those awful scenarios that might happen.
Yeah, I agree. I think antitrust has to be like an absolute core pillar of any successful Democratic campaign going forward, particularly if you're at that federal level where you have power in it. You named Zoran Mamdani. He's someone who, like, as the mayor of New York, he has no power over that. But the kinds of politics he preaches are clearly going to be successful in lots of places. And I agree. And I think anyone running for president in 2028 is going to need a plan for this. And I think people who are mealy-mouthed about that aren't going to make it far in that primary. I just don't. We're not going to be in the 2020 mode where, like, we selected Joe Biden basically out of fear about electability. That's not going to be the concern in 2028 in the same way, because unless things really go to shit, it's not going to be us against Trump again or something like that. So, we're going to be in a different environment. And again, I also think, like, I've seen this, I also think Democrats, like people on the left like us, are a little too doomerish about the electoral future. I think if you look at the numbers right now, we're looking at like apocalypse numbers for the Republicans this November.
Yes.
Which is gonna, like, it's gonna change things. Like, things are, I'm not saying everything's gonna turn around and be good tomorrow, but like the assumption that the current shit moment we're in is just the new normal, I think is wrong. And I think we're gonna see, one way or another, things are gonna start shifting sooner rather than later. So
Yeah, exactly. That's that, like, the arc of history is long, the wheel of fortune turns, like, the people who are on top are not always on top. For me, the biggest concern is less like the Republicans retaining power, which I just don't think is a reality. I really do not think that there's a version where that happens, right? That like, I think these midterms are going to be absolutely disastrous for them. Like you can just feel it in Texas. And I'm in fucking Texas, bro. Like you don't get more deep red than this fucking shit, where every other store is a gun store and everything between those gun stores is a church. It's fucking crazy. If you've never been in Texas, it's fucking nuts. Even here, you can feel that energy. For me, the concern is not, do the Democrats get in power? It's, do the right Democrats get in power, right? And it's like, and do they get in power with the right intentions? Because I think we could see with, it's just very obvious that the leadership in the party is not interested in good things. I don't know. I just have to say it nicely. I mean, they're evil people too, and they need to get the fuck out. And we need people who are interested in actual positive change and are not interested in maintaining a status quo that benefits them. It just needs to happen. And that's, it's not about fighting the Republicans. It's about getting the right version of the Democratic Party situated for a future that can be productive.
All right, well, Sean, that ends our absolutely torturous news section. We both have a couple of little stuff things listed, but we could also save those for next time. Do you want to go into the monthly 10, or do you want to talk about your stuff?
Yeah, let's just go to the monthly 10. I'll just mention I've been playing Neo 3, but I have not played enough to really talk about, because I that was very heavily derailed by Resident Evil Requiem coming out and me spending my entire Saturday just playing that. So Neo 3, I've been having a good time, but I'll talk about that more in a future podcast once I've gotten more time into it.
Yeah, and in the Resident Evil Requiem episode, we might be able to go into a couple of little stuff things, too. So, Sean, try to describe as best you can the absolutely insane monthly 10 challenge I gave you last time.
Yes, I will, and I'll say I added an extra little piece of it to give me a little bit more room for it as well. So what you told me was we have this game Pokopia coming out, which is your Pokemon meets Dragon Quest builders, but it has the strange premise of you are playing as a Ditto who is transformed in the form of a human and then is able to sort of, through communicating with Pokemon, get their powers and transform parts of its body into like a plant and shit like that. And so inspired by that very strange premise for a video game, you asked me to make a list of the top 10 games that Pokemon can do that has the premise that Ditto takes the body of the person you play as. I added onto that, or that Ditto features prominently within the characters of the game. So not all of these are you strictly are playing as Ditto, but there are some others that it is, Ditto related in some way.
Okay, this is good. I think that is a good addition.
All right. And I will say that when you originally gave me this pitch, I was like, what the fuck am I even going to do? And then I started, and I thought, like, 5 or 10 minutes passed. And then the thing that will be my number one on this list popped into my head, and I'm like, okay, now I can do this. And so I'll say that. Basically, I've gone for video game parodies that involve Ditto in some way. So these are all based in some way on existing video games and what happens with them. Once Ditto.
That's what I wanted. This is great. Yeah.
All right. So my number 10, this is very simple. I call it Star Rail Ditto Impact. I just think we should have a video game that's a gacha game where, they have a new update every 6 weeks or so and they release a new character, but every single new character is always just Ditto. And you're just constantly, I gotta get my fucking gems so I can roll the fucking gacha, and I gotta get my Ditto. It's a new Ditto this week, and it's, they can all turn into all the other characters, but all the other characters are just Dittos. So it's just Dittos being Dittos, and you spend $1,000 getting your gold Ditto this week, or the blue Ditto next 6 weeks. I just need my gacha Ditto game.
Can they turn into stuff, or are they just static, like Dittos with different colors?
I like the idea of they can turn into stuff, but they can only turn it, because they can turn into any character in the game. But the only characters in the game are Dittos, which means that they can only turn into the other Dittos. So it's all just Dittos turning into Dittos, because I just like the idea of spending money on this little fucking gelatinous blob, and that's the only thing you can ever get in the game.
I actually, Sean, earlier today, I realized I hadn't, I'm going to play Pokemon Pokopia, and I hadn't pre-ordered it yet, and so I was seeing, is there anywhere, like, I can get a little bonus, just check out. And the pre-order bonus that is, like, universal with Pokemon Pokopia is a big Ditto rug that you can put in your, like, room in the game. But when I saw that, it was on Amazon, and I thought it was they actually gave you a Ditto rug with the game when you bought it, and I would love that. If I got a big fucking Ditto rug, I would put it, like, at my front door when people came in. It would be great.
Yes. All right. So that is my number 10. My number 9, this one's a really simple pitch. In fact, it's not even a new video game. It's just, this could be an update for an existing video game. But I want a Civilization game, like Sid Meier's Civilization, but one of the civs is just a Ditto. And so you just have a little gelatinous blob man Ditto, and then all of your, like, villagers and stuff like that you make, and your, like, different troops that you can have and stuff, they're all Dittos, but they can just turn into any of the other unit types. So it's like, if I want to be a Ditto civilization, I can have, like, American musketmen, and I can have fucking samurai at the same time, because it's just Dittos. They just turn into whatever you want.
I like this. I think that would be a fun way to revive Civilization for our modern age of gaming.
Yes, there's just a lot of potential for really interesting diplomacy moves you can make, because it's like I can have my Ditto turn into, I don't know, Cleopatra, and I'm talking to Gandhi, and Gandhi thinks I'm the real Cleopatra, but I'm just Ditto Cleopatra, and, like, break a treaty that they had made and incite a war. There's just a lot you could do with Civ, but you are Ditto.
I want, so they, the Civ games are always called Sid Meier's Civilization.
Yes.
I want it as Sid Meier's, parentheses, and Ditto's Civilization.
Yes. Because you're basically guaranteed to win if you play against Ditto. It would just be so wildly overpowered compared to Gandhi. The poor guy, he just can't stand up to the Dittos. All right.
I hope no one clips that out of context for you, Sean. That could be really bad.
No, it's not just Gandhi, it's nobody. Abe Lincoln, he can't do it either.
Yeah.
All right, my number 8, staking on, our kind of simulation games, I just call it Ditto City, but it's like a Sim City game. But for this one, the idea is you think you're just running a regular city and you're doing your city management, but it slowly becomes apparent over the course of the game that your population is being replaced by Ditto copies of the people that you thought they were. And that it was originally humans, and they're just slowly being replaced by these Dittos. And you can only know when you click on people and you see those beady fucking eyes staring back at you. And you have to decide, do I, get rid of the Dittos and, try to get a natural disaster and quarantine all the Dittos into, a Ditto ghetto and just get rid of them? Or do I embrace the Dittos and I just, let all the regular humans be taken over and it's just a city of Dittos? You make the path, you chart the course you want, but whatever path you take, you have to deal with the Dittos somehow.
I like it. I would play that.
All right, my number 7. This is where it gets a little bit more elaborate, where I've started writing little captions for each one to kind of explain the pitch. So This one, I'm going to actually read the caption, and then I'll say the title of the game. So this is a game set in a post-apocalyptic world where you play a man who lost his daughter at the fall of civilization, and he has to rediscover his humanity and a human connection as he helps transport a little girl who looks strangely identical to his original daughter. But little does he know that she's a little something more than human, and this is the Ditto of Us. So it's just The Last of Us, but instead of Ellie being immune to the infection or whatever, she can still be immune to the infection, but it's a Ditto. And it just instinctively turns itself into whoever is the person it needs to in order to be protected. And it does that to fake Joel's daughter. And that's the whole relationship there.
I just thought of the most fucked up alternate ending for this game. You're going to call me crazy. Can I share it?
Yes, go ahead. What is
it? So I'm assuming this follows the general, plot of Last of Us Part 1. And at the end of Last of Us Part 1, Joel goes absolutely nuts in that hospital trying to save Ellie, right? And in this game, I assume that his Ditto is our Ellie, right?
Yes.
Sean? Okay.
Yeah.
So that scene, this is the climactic scene of the game where you walk into the room and you shoot the doctor to save Ellie. It turns out Ditto turned into that doctor, and Joel kills the Ditto, and that's the end of the game. Is he didn't save the little girl, he fucking killed Ditto, the Ditto you've been following the whole time, and he didn't know it, and he just goes crazy and shoots himself, and that's the end of the game.
All right. You made an even darker version of the Ditto of Us than I did. I thought it's like he can rediscover his humanity, you know, and he learns that even if it's a Ditto, it's still real. This relationship, it's still there.
He does. It's just at the end, he goes in guns blazing, and Ditto, the little Ellie Ditto was trying to survive, so it turned into the Doctor, and that's what happened. And he accidentally. This is kind of like the end of like Stephen King's The Mist, the Frank Darabont movie. If you've seen that, you know what I'm talking about. That's what I'm imagining here. Okay.
Absolutely. All right, my number 6. I think this just like the title says it all. I'm a big fan of this title. Tony Hawk's Ditto Skater. This is a game where it's Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, but you can only play as one character, which is Ditto. And so you're playing as a Ditto who takes on the form of all the professional skaters in order to learn all their sick tricks, so you can become the sickest skater in the whole world.
I think this game has to start with Ditto in its normal, like, pink blob form, trying to get on the skateboard, and you're trying to skate as Ditto, and it can't do it because it has no legs or anything, and so it just keeps falling off, and then it, like, meets Tony Hawk, and, like, you know, Tony is very nice to the Ditto, and so it turns into Tony. It'd be great.
Yes. Absolutely, yeah. You have to start as just a regular-ass Ditto, and then maybe you turn into a normal person, and then you start working your way up, turning into more and more better pro skaters as you go up and you meet more and more, and then you take over their bodies or whatever. I mean, you don't take over, you transform into them, but by transforming into them, you learn their special moves. And so ultimately, you're this like freak chimera ultimate pro skater who has the moves of all of them. And you've got like, my right leg is to Tony Hawk's right leg, and my left leg is from some other one is like a little bit better, and all this kind of shit. It's just, yeah, that's what I want.
I want this too. I also think there should be a mechanic whereby the Ditto skater can just take way more damage, because if it breaks a leg, it can just reform it. It's a Ditto. It's not a real leg. And so I think you should have some more injury mechanics in this game because of that.
Yeah, we definitely can do that. All right, my number 5. I think I'll read the title here, then I'll give my little blurb. My title for this game is Metal Ditto Solid, Dittos of the Patriots. This is, you play as Secret Agent Solid Ditto, who must solve a secret terrorist incident, and in the process, he meets his twin quote-unquote brother, Liquid Ditto. And when he does that, he learns that Solid Ditto isn't human. He's a gelatinous creature who is the result of a secret government experiment called Les Pokémon Terribles, which was created to produce the ultimate of soldiers. And this is the Metal Ditto Solid series. And you learn about the Patriots, which controlled the U.S. government. All that's exactly like Metal Gear Solid. The only difference.
That's the thing, Sean. If you're listening to this and you've never played Metal Gear Solid, you might think Sean just came up with an intentionally ridiculous scenario to put Ditto into. He just took the actual plot of Metal Gear Solid 2 and did find and replace on Snake for Ditto.
Yeah, well, when I originally wrote this blurb, I had like 3 more sentences, which was me just making fun of the dominant versus recessive gene bullshit from Metal Gear Solid, which is not how any of that shit works. And I was like, this is not relevant to the conversation. I can't just use this as a platform to make fun of Metal Gear Solid. The thing I wanted to say is Les Pokémon Terribles, which is the best name for a secret government program ever.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I would play this, and I feel like the stealth mechanics could be pretty good with Ditto as solid. Yeah.
Who needs to carry around a cardboard box? You can just turn into a cardboard box.
That'd be fucking great.
It's not. He turns into something that regularly blends into the environment. He can only turn into a cardboard box because he's not that good of a Ditto. All right, for this next one, let me read the blurb and then I'll say the title. So this is, you play as a rookie cop who is on a new assignment, but in doing so, you get wrapped up in a massive bioterror incident which consumes the city in which you've moved to. Soulless creatures with beady eyes, which replicate the creature's environment around them, senselessly attack and consume the innocent. You must solve puzzles and engage in tense combat to escape the city. But what will you learn about yourself on the way out? This is Resident Ditto. Or, in Japan, Ditto Hazard.
Well, Ditto's name is different in Japan. What is Ditto's Japanese name?
That's actually a good question.
I think it's Metamon, isn't it? Yeah, it's Metamon.
Metamon
Meta Hazard? Yeah. I would play this. So basically, you're Leon S. Kennedy fighting a bunch of Dittos.
Yes, but you learn at the end of the game that you also are a Ditto, and you just lost your memory. And that's like the horrifying secret you discover at the end of the game.
Okay, that'd be pretty good. Yeah, I'd play this.
All right. My number 3, I really like this one. I'll read the blurb first. You're a member of an outlaw gang in the Old West who must navigate the changing times while helping take care of your camp of fellow outlaws. However, your morally nihilistic attitude towards life comes to a shocking end when you die of tuberculosis halfway through the game. In the second half, you must play as a Ditto who has taken the form of the main character and go about on a journey to make up for his sins. This is Red Ditto Redemption.
So, okay, it's just Red Dead 2, no changes up until Arthur dies, and then
Yes, Arthur dies at the point where you learn you have tuberculosis in Red Dead Redemption 2. Instead of you just learn you have it, he just straight up fucking keels over from tuberculosis.
Okay.
So the whole second half of the game where he has, like, his view on life changes, and he's like, I can't be an evil man, I need to, like, do good in the world. That's not Arthur Morgan. That's a Ditto in the guise of Arthur Morgan. That maybe he saved that Ditto earlier in the game.
That's way better. Okay, yeah, I like that.
And so you're wandering around as this Ditto pretending to be Arthur Morgan with tuberculosis.
But you have a bunch of fun powers you can use in the Old West because you're a Ditto. I think this actually sounds like a pretty fucking good game. I would play this.
Yes. Absolutely. And you know,
also,
I think maybe
combining a Rockstar game with a Pokemon game, this would be the greatest selling game of all time, I assume.
It would. Yes.
Yeah.
You know, you're riding around on, like, Rapidashes and Ponytas and shit, you know. You gotta have some regular other Pokemon in there. I like the idea of, like, the Ditto, you know, sort of like the ending of Red Dead 2 happens as it happens, and the Ditto quote unquote lets Arthur Morgan die, and then it turns back into its regular self, and then maybe in this version of the events, John Marston also tragically died near the end of Red Dead 2, and then the Ditto turns into John Marston and goes and builds a fucking house and all this shit. And then at the end of Red Dead Redemption Originals plot, where John Marston goes out and, you know, faces his end, maybe in that version, Jack Marston also had tragically already been killed off, and so the Ditto just turns into Jack Marston, and every playable character in the Red Dead franchise is just this Ditto passing from one to the next.
I'm imagining the Ditto, the scene where John Marston dies and he comes out of the barn and he gets shot full of holes. It happens the same way, but then his body just shrinks down to the Ditto because the bullets didn't hurt him because he's a Ditto, and then he just gets up and walks away, and all the Old West, you know, gang guys are like, what the fuck was that?
Yes. It'd be a pretty great game. All right, my number 2 game, I'll start with the title here. This is a game I'm just going to call Nier Ditomata. This is a Yoko Taro directed RPG action game, which is about Dittos who have created their own civilization, the post-apocalypse, which emulates what they know of humanity. But they all live on the moon, and so they have to come to actual Earth and confront, I don't know, some other Pokemon that has taken over. I don't know what Pokemon is, the robots, Geodudes or some shit. And there's, you know...
Porygon. Porygon and Porygon 2.
Yes, very good. Yes, the Porygons have taken over the Earth, and so the Dittos that look like humans have to come to the Earth and learn that they've kind of misunderstood everything about human culture and civilization and work out their kind of sadomasochistic fantasies. I think it'd be a very good game. And I'll say this was the second thing I wrote down when she gave me this title. The first one is what I'll talk about with number 1, but the next thing I wrote was just Nier Ditomata, and I pad myself off and walked away from my computer until a couple days ago when I was like, oh wait, I have to come up with 8 more things for this list.
That's pretty good. I would have done the same thing.
All right, and now number 1. This is my favorite one, mostly because I think the video game concept here is fucking fantastic. I call this game Ditto Meki Memorial. This is a game where you play as a high school student who transfers to a new town, and at your new school there's a legend that if you meet with someone of the opposite sex below the cherry blossom tree on graduation day, that you are destined to be with each other forever. You spend your school days pursuing a romance with one of 5 different heroines, but when that fateful day arrives, what is it exactly that waits for you below the cherry blossom petals? This is a game, it's a dating sim game like Tokimeki Memorial. If people don't know, that's like the granddaddy of dating sim games. But every time you play the game, one of the 5 heroines is replaced with a Ditto copy of that heroine. And so you are both trying to romance the heroines, but you also need to figure out, is this the real one? Or is this a Ditto version that has replaced her? And at that point, you can go down a couple of different routes. You know, you can decide on the, you know, when you meet the Ditto below the Sakura tree at the end of the game, if you want to confront the Ditto and reject that romance, right? And that leads to like one ending of the game. But of course, the true ending that you have to jump through a bunch of loopholes to get to is where you get the Ditto, you've got enough affection points with the Ditto, but instead of rejecting the Ditto at the end, you embrace the Ditto and you fuck the Ditto. And that is the ending of the game.
I didn't know we were going to get to the sentence, you fuck the Ditto.
It's what has to happen. I know that Tokimeki Memorial is not an adult game, but in this version, of course, this is only in the PC version where you can fuck the Ditto, and the PC version has different voice actors than the fucking PS2 version or whatever. I get it. But if you want the version where you fuck the Ditto at the true ending, you got to get the PC one of Ditto Meki Memorial.
Okay, well, this sounds amazing. Sean, I thought for sure one of your entries was going to be Hitman, but with Ditto, where instead of playing as Agent 47, you're just Ditto going around, and instead of having to take costumes and stuff, you just transform into them. The thing is, it wouldn't change the game at all.
Exactly.
It would be the same.
One of the things I wrote down was Ditto Man, and I thought, just thinking about it, I'm like, that's just that's not a different game. Like, it's just the exact same video game with the Ditto. So I decided not to put it on my list, but I did have that idea, because I'm like, this is just the exact same thing. It's just, it's slightly easier for him to turn into other people. I don't know.
And then it's slightly harder at the beginning because you're a little pink monster and you have to hide from everyone. But yeah, once you do your first transformation, you're kind of in the clear, I guess.
Yeah. But I honestly, I love the idea of this fucking dating sim game, but one of the girls is like a shape-shifting monster, and you have to figure out who it is. It's just, I had that, again, it's like immediately, or like 5 to 10 minutes after you gave me that prompt, I was like, what the fuck do I even do with this? And I don't know what it says about my brain that, like, the thing that popped in my head was like, what if it was a dating sim, but one of the girls was a Ditto? And I was like, that is the best idea for a video game anyone has ever had. Why am I not rich right now?
Why has no one let me fuck the Ditto yet?
Exactly. It's a big pile of goo. I mean, what else could you ask for?
All right, I'm not going to interrogate that too much. Sean, what is your challenge for me for the April episode of Purely Academic?
All right, Jonathan, I have given you, for April, by far the most specific and niche list ever. And I'm like the only person that could give you this. Before I give you this list, Jonathan, I have a very important question. Are you a fan, and do you think it's fun to have ridiculous, elaborate acronyms that you have like tortuously assembled the words to have the acronym sound like a real word?
Yes. I kind of ironically, but yes, I think it's hilarious. I think it's fucking stupid, but yeah. Then
I think you will have a fun time with this prompt, Jonathan. So this school year, the 25 to 26 school year, is the last school year where Texas will be administering their State of Texas Assessments of Academic Readiness, or the STAR test, which is their fancy test for their standardized test thing. They're doing a different thing in the 26-27 school year. But tragically, Jonathan, they don't have a fun acronym for what's going to replace the State of Texas Assessments of Academic Readiness, or STAR test. So, Jonathan, I need you to come up with what are the 10 best acronyms that Texas could use for a new standardized test. If you want, you can come up with what kind of test it is, and if you want to play around with that, or if you just want to come up with the most torturous acronyms possible, because God, Texas loves their fucking acronyms, but they're fucking off their game right now. I need you to help us out.
Sean, I'm the perfect person for this, because not only am I also an educator, I taught the ACT and the SAT for years, so I thought a lot about this, and at one point I even noodled around with writing my own test, because I thought the ACT and SAT were so bad, and I did come up with a dumb acronym for what my test would be. I've thought about this. I've thought about this.
I had, because I was struggling on coming up with things, and because of shit at my job, I've been thinking about the STAR test a lot recently, because it happens in April. And I'm like, Jonathan loves stupid acronyms. He'll be a pig in shit if I give him this topic. I'm like, it's because I was like, this is so niche and weird. But I was like, he's going to be a happy camper. So
pig in shit is the right term. This is the most excited I've ever been for one of these. This is fun. This is great.
All right, so everyone listening to this can look forward to a very helpful list of 10 things that are new acronyms. And maybe I can take this to the TEA, the Texas Education Agency, and see if they can take this up for whatever form of test they're going to give us next year.